Yes, thank you very much for coming, everybody. Please make sure to settle down. We're about to get started. This is so dumb. Thank you very much, everybody, to coming to. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to do another one of these, but I guess we have. I guess we have a company name now. Vox Talks, memes worth sharing, which is all about sharing ideas, sharing concepts, and really it's an excuse for me to get to talk about something that I have been asked about and wound up talking about quite a bit on other streams of mine. So don't worry, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine. Anyway, thank you all very much for coming. Today, my talk is going to be about the process of having, developing, and then executing a creative idea. I have some presentation slides prepared. I have sort of a general flow, but you need to remember that I'm not by any means an expert. I've had a pretty long, interesting life, many hundred years in the making, and I've had the opportunity to do lots of very interesting things. And I figure that even though I'm not always perfect about my creative endeavors, I think that I have a lot of interesting knowledge and experience to share. So I've got some valuable lessons for everybody. So let me start this in more of a hilarious way, shall I? I want you to raise your hand, or press 1, as you would say, if you've ever had an idea for something that just made you feel like $1 million. You thought that if the world could see it, they would know that you were a true genius. And then you never wrote it down. It's been in the ideas phase. It's been in the inside your head phase for, God knows how long. Be honest. Show of hands. Yeah, it's a lot of people. And the reason why I'm speaking to you today is because I was, or sometimes still am, in the same camp as well. I'm very passionate about making sure that as many people as possible have the ability to share the ideas that they want to share. And I want to be able to essentially share what I've learned from being given the confidence by the position that I'm in and the happiness that I've gained from being able to work on so many interesting things. And I want to share that with some of you. There's a lot to this process and there's a lot to being creative that a lot of people may never get to feel. And if I can impart just a little bit of confidence and excitement onto you for your own endeavors in the future, then that would make me pretty happy. So let's zoom in, shall we? And let's see what is coming next. Let me get the lights on in here. Looks like a different room entirely. Well, that's because it looks different with the lights off. Nothing sus going on here at all, actually. Now you can take me seriously. Now I'm of a proper size. Okay, yes, I've put my grippers away and I'm ready to get on with the talk. So, let's begin. It all begins with an idea, right? So, ideas can come from all sorts of different places. And I think that one of the worst things that we can do as creative people is to try and seek ideas without allowing them to come to us first. A lot of the time, what I've experienced in particular, when I have sort of a deadline coming up and I'm being told sort of, you need to come up with an idea for this in the next couple of days, suddenly all inspiration vanishes. The truth is, creativity is not something that you can force. Creativity is not something that you can drive yourself through and say, well, I will have a good idea by this time and then everything will be great. Truth is, that's not always how it works. Before we even begin, the best piece of advice that I could give you is to remember that if you are a creative person and this is the kind of thing that you want to do with your life, those kinds of ideas will find you eventually, as long as you remember to nurture them and you remember to nurture yourself. Make sure to give yourself time, because without time, you'll wind up having worse ideas and forcing ideas that perhaps you don't even like. And if you're creating something that you don't even like, chances are probably not going to be liked by very many other people as well, although you never know. So we're going to divide this up into 3 sections, as is with the title of this talk. Step 1 is going to be all about how to have an idea. Step one is inspiration. The first and most important thing that I want to talk about when it comes to being inspired and coming up with something is always, always, always feed your muse. Now, for those of you who might not be familiar with the term, it means to make sure to, if you want to create art, make absolutely sure that you consume as much art as you possibly can. For me, my interest is in film, and as a result, I try to watch as many films as possible. Now, it's not always easy. We live in a very busy world. We can have scheduled events. We can have all sorts of different things that take up our time and our energy. We need to go to work. We need to earn money. We need to pay rent. We need to cook. We need to make food. We need to, perhaps if you've got other goals outside of the home, maybe you're going to the gym and working out. Maybe you need to keep up with your family. Maybe you have a relationship that you need to spend time with. Maybe you've got friends who want to spend time with you. It's very difficult in our day and age to make time to really give ourselves time. But as someone who is creative, what you should be trying to do is finding just a little way of engaging with art that you care about as often as you can. For me, I try to consume films or TV as whenever I feel the urge to. So very recently, what I've run into was a very interesting experience where I watched a short horror film on YouTube, only 7 minutes, but in that 7 minutes, I was inspired to create something similar of my own. As soon as I watched that, another idea spawned, and then from there, the rest of these steps that you'll learn more about begin to proceed. Perhaps your interest is in something else. Perhaps your interest is in literature. Well, if you like to write, if you like to read, then the best thing that I can recommend if you're running out of time in life is probably to try and read shorter form literature. Poetry is a wonderful form of literature. Short stories, novellas, and all sorts of other short types of literature are definitely just as valid as the greats like War and Peace or other books like that. I believe there was some Smash Brothers Brawl fan fiction that was about twice as many words as War and Peace, which somehow is not actually surprising to me. You don't need to read something like that, and you shouldn't let other people tell you what you should or should not read, or should not consume in order to consider yourself a true artist. There is no such thing. Me, I've been to film school. I would consider myself a filmmaker. I enjoy making films of all different types and sizes, but I haven't seen Pulp Fiction and I haven't seen The Godfather. There is no such thing as a hard requirement. The only hard requirement is that you try and make something, and making something follows on from an idea. So whether it's film, whether it's TV, whether it's literature, whether it's music, or any other type of art that you care about, it can be as obscure or as specific as is to you as anything. Completely lost my train of thought. It can be no matter what it is. Consume the works of art made by other people, because you never know when one of them will create something and you'll consume it, and suddenly it'll click and you'll be inspired and want to create something of your own. I'm doing better than I thought I would, actually. I don't have anything written down. I'm just spitballing at the moment. A really interesting sort of thing that is also true to remember, and one thing that I think a lot of the time we can feel quite pressured about, is the age-old saying that great artists steal, and this is 100% true. I'm here to hit you with a really hard dose of reality. There are no original ideas. Every artistic design that you have seen was inspired by a design that came before it. Every sculpture that was sculpted based on an idea that a person had when they saw another sculpture or when they saw a particularly beautiful person or thing. We shouldn't be going into our creative professions, and we shouldn't be trying to make anything without accepting the fact that we have our influences. And if anything, remember that imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. This usually comes off as someone being pathetic and trying to copy you. It isn't someone you should worry about, and they probably like you quite a lot. But I think that in art, what we should remember is that if you were to use let's say you were writing a story, if you were to use a plot point, or if you were to use sort of a design very similar to something from a work of art that you really, really care about, that would not be an act of stealing or rogue copying or plagiarism. Copy and pasting exact lines of dialogue from a script might be a form of plagiarism to some extent, but even then, there are only so many words that we can say in a given language. Please, when going forward and just trying to make something, don't bother yourself with the idea that you might be stealing from someone else. You are just being inspired. Unless, of course, you are deliberately stealing, in which case, don't do that. Getting inspired and making something similar is not stealing. It's just how artists work. Another really important thing that a lot of the time in education tends to be sort of neglected is that everyone's process is entirely unique. So those of you who've been to sort of a media course, maybe you've been to sort of a creative university class, maybe you've been to an extracurricular club where you've tried to come up with an idea for a story or a painting or a script or something like that. A lot of the time what they'll recommend you make is something called a mood board. And everyone's idea of what a mood board is it's like a Pinterest board, right? It's like a little page with all sorts of different photographs that inspires you and gives you ideas for what to do with your story. These are a nice idea. The fact is, I've tried making mood boards before, and for my own process, I don't think they work very well. What I've always done is I have made a playlist of songs that sort of line up with various scenes from throughout a script that I might be writing. And I spoke to someone recently, and when I told them about this, they said, well, that is like a mood board of its own. It just takes on a different form. And I cannot express to you how finding a process like this and finding one that speaks to you and one that connects with you and helps you have ideas, I can't express how valuable something like this is. Were it not for my process of coming up with a concept for a story and then listening to music that would inform the content of certain scenes, the pacing of those scenes, the back and forth of the action, the conversations, it all comes, at least for me, from music. For you, it might come from something else. Perhaps you'll make a mood board out of video. A really interesting story, actually, is how director Taika Waititi originally applied for the role of directing the film Thor Ragnarok. When he put himself forward to be the director of this project, he had only ever worked on small independent films before, although Hunt for the Wilderpeople, despite being an independent film from New Zealand, is actually the most profitable New Zealand-made film of all time, or perhaps the highest grossing. It's one of those. When he submitted himself to direct Thor Ragnarok, it was a project larger than he'd ever made before, but he'd stuck to his process. If anyone's ever seen Thor Ragnarok, you'll know that in the trailers and at multiple points in the film, they used the song, oh God, what is it called? Hang on a minute. I know it's Led Zeppelin, I can't remember. The Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin, right? Huge theme and motif in Thor Ragnarok. When Taika applied for this role, he made essentially a mock music video using clips from other films and matched them up to that song. And when he showed it to the producers at Marvel, they liked it, and sooner or later he was given the role. That, I believe, is his version of a mood board. He made an AMV. Exactly. He made a fan cam. He made a Thor fan cam with the Immigrant Song, and it went all the way through production to the point where that song is the focal point of the entire movie. So again, this follows in from feeding your muse. The more art that you consume, the more of it will inspire you, and the more of it will slot into the tapestry that creates something new that you are creating. Maybe recently you've been watching a load of different horror movies, right? If you've watched a lot of horror movies, perhaps you get an idea for a monster from one film, and you'll take a screenshot of that monster and put it in your mood board, and then you'll watch a different horror movie and you'll sort of see a certain shot or angle, like, oh, I like the way that they have the Dutch angle in this scene where a character's running down a corridor, and they twist the camera to give the audience a feeling of chaos. Wouldn't be plagiarizing to get the idea for that? Put that in your mood board as well. Maybe you've been listening to the soundtrack from a horror film and you think, oh, this sounds exactly like what I would really like to be in this scene. Then you grab that piece of music from Spotify or Apple Music or YouTube or whatever you do, and then you add it to something. You can keep track of it, and you can think and think and think and think. And then from there, I'm telling you, if you haven't done this before, I imagine a lot of you have, the idea will just sprout and it will grow, and it's fascinating. One of the most important things that we can do with these processes is not let it stay locked up inside our head, because you wouldn't believe just how nonsensical some ideas are when they go straight from your head onto paper. You can do both of these. You can tell someone and you can write it down, or you can do either or. A lot of the time, telling someone else can come with a lot of problems. Perhaps you don't trust someone quite as much with your idea as you would want. In that case, writing it down on a piece of paper is a better idea. But if you do trust someone, if there's someone else in your life who you really enjoy talking to about your ideas or about the ideas of other people, about art and creativity in general, this tends to be a pretty good way of getting your ideas out in the open and filling in some of the gaps that can sometimes be stopping you from moving forward. On a project that I've been working on for more than a year now, I recall that there was one hole in the plot that I was thinking about for the longest time, and I had no idea how to fill it. No matter how hard I thought, no matter how hard I questioned myself, I had no clue of how I would make it work. And then I decided to speak with this little guy down on my belt, Mr. Onigiri, and he said, "Why not do this?" And everything fell into place, and it clicked. Speaking with other people is vastly underrated, I think, because many creative people tend to be introverts. Being an introvert doesn't mean that you can't share your ideas. It might be more difficult, but you can do it. Sharing these things often means that another person's perspective can improve it and make it greater. Not always, but sometimes, and it's worth asking to open yourself up to that possibility. As for writing things down, this is just a good idea in general. When you think of ideas in your head, a lot of the time they can tend to sort of become absolute, and they can seem so perfect and so cool when you're thinking about them. But then sometimes when you write them down, you can start to notice holes and flaws in what you've done, and this is good because then you can start working on those. Excuse me. It's very difficult to edit what's in one's own head. It's very difficult to say, oh, let's take that away, let's add that, let's nix that, let's add something else, or veto that idea, let's add something else. Much easier to do this whether you've got a laptop, a phone, or just a pen and paper. This is where it all begins. And this is the shortest section of the talk because we've had our idea by now. You have fed your muse, you've been consuming art, and you've found something that kind of connects with you. You've managed to put together something that helps you think about it, and then you've put it on paper, and when you look at it and you read it, there it is. Hold on. Multiple spreadsheets and Google Docs with random ideas. It is brilliant to have just something to look down at, because the one thing that paper doesn't do, that your mind does do quite often, mine especially, is forget things. Sometimes, I can't tell you the amount of times I've had what feels like a brilliant idea, and then I don't write it down, and a few weeks later when I try to go back to it, I'm suddenly like, what was that brilliant idea I had? And it's lost to time. Lost media. Isn't that tragic? Isn't that terrible? So let's think of the process of having an idea as a 3-step process. There is ingestion, taking in art of any kind that you enjoy. There is processing that art. There is consuming it and thinking about it inside your head, actively engaging with it in a way that means something to you. Because quick side note, there are 2 types of artistic consumption. There is active consumption and there's passive consumption. Passive consumption, it tends to be more commercially viable for a lot of studios to put out projects that feed into that kind of thing. I don't know if you've ever sort of watched a film with someone and you're struggling to get into it and they say, it's great if you just switch your brain off. These films can be fun, and any project like that can be enjoyable to look at. But I would say try to avoid, while you're watching anything, try to avoid switching your brain off. Even if you're watching a popcorn flick, even if you're watching a silly film or you're reading a silly book that has no sort of real like thing to say, it's not super deep, it just is what it is, still, there is artistry present in everything, and actively consuming instead of just sitting back and letting it happen to you is the best way that you can really start to notice things. So you've ingested it, you've processed it, and then you sort of breathe it out and onto the page. You've taken something in, you've worked on it, and now it exists and it's real. And the next step is to take that idea, all of the mess that's inside your brain has been shot onto a piece of paper, and now what you can do is you can develop it. This is step 2, and it's all about taking that idea and making it perfect. The first and most important thing that I really want to say about developing an idea, this is very much more like an extension of the second part of step 1. When you have an idea, you need to think, and you need to chip away at it over a long period of time. Yeah, look, that's me. The most important thing that you can do is listen to your heart. I'm going to bring up Taika again. Taika has talked about his process of writing screenplays and how a lot of the time it feels quite improvisational. And what this means for him is that what he does is while he's writing a script, he will be just chipping away at a scene and he'll think like, yeah, this is fun. And suddenly he'll really be in tune with his senses and how much fun he's having. If he's writing a scene and he's bored, gets to the end of the scene and thinks, I don't like that one, he'll either end the scene earlier than he thought, or he'll scrap it entirely and he'll think, where's a fun location? Ooh, a school. Okay, the characters are at a school, and boom, he goes for the next step. Immediately, he follows his heart and his mind to the next most important place. So, what I would like to impress upon you is that sometimes what we can tend to feel is a really frightening sense that our own ideas won't translate well into the real world. And this is very rarely true. It's usually about what form they take. Obviously, there are very many bad ideas that a person can have, but a lot of the time when it comes to the way that one structures a plot, or the way that one creates a scene, or the way that one sketches a painting, a lot of the time, if you force yourself down the narrow road of what you think you should be doing, rather than the very wide and inviting road of what it is you feel like you want to do, chances are it's probably going to wind up a lot better if you just do what you want to do. If something appeals to you personally, your vision and your creativity matters a lot. It matters, I would say, in the process of you just being by yourself and making it and developing this idea. And I think it's the most important thing of all. It needs to be fun. Because if you're not having fun while you're trying to engage in what at this stage might even just be a hobby, well, why are you doing it if you're not having fun? Why are you doing it if it doesn't develop a sense of interest? Don't think, other projects do this, so I should probably do that. If you're excited to do that, you can definitely do that. But if you're not excited to do that and you think, I really don't want to do that, but I kind of have to, that's a feeling you should save for when you're actually putting it out into the world and you need to worry about all of the other aspects of publishing something. While you're just dealing with your own head, inspire yourself. Listen to the little voices that say, oh, that would be cool. Just do it. Oh my God, I need to move that. Get out of here, get out of here, get out of here. Covered up my face. Anyway, that's kind of the point about this one. Let's move on. It's okay to be wrong. And I think that this is one of the things that holds people up so much when they're beginning something new. The most important thing to remember is that creativity and any sort of thing where you put a personal experience and you try to turn that into a product, it can tend to be very personal. and there's nothing wrong with this. Personal works of art are very deeply interesting. You know, I'm a big fan of sort of autobiographical work. One of my favorite films that came out in the last year was Bardo by Alejandro González Iñárritu, which was a very, very self-indulgent piece of work. In everything but name, the main character is himself, and a lot of the themes expressed are things that he struggles with and concepts that he wishes he had been able to address in other parts of his work. There's nothing wrong with this, and there's nothing selfish about being self-indulgent. The most important thing to remember is that when you are self-indulgent, and when you put parts of your heart and your soul out into the world, being told, I don't know about that, it can be really, really hurtful. Sometimes you might have had an idea that you think, God, that's just the best thing in the world. And then someone comes along and says, well, I don't think it's very good. And suddenly, you kind of lose interest in the whole idea to begin with. It's easy to lapse into this depressive state where you wonder, well, if they didn't like that part, maybe other people won't like this part and that part and that part. It's fine. Having a process of editing your work and changing little bits around is all down to how you interpret what other people tell you. So this is why I would say be careful about who you show your work to in its earliest stages, because this is when it's at its most sensitive. You need to make sure that you trust the people that you're showing it to. These need to be people that you care about and people that care about you. One of the most depressing things that you can possibly do is show a piece of work to someone who doesn't like you very much, and they're just going to take that as an opportunity to run you down. And you'll think it's a problem with your work, when in actuality, it's just someone else's bias that's affecting you in a negative way. Your friends, if they really care about you, will look at your work, and if you ask them, please, please, please be honest about how you feel about it, they will be honest. And if they find a mistake, they'll tell you what it is. If they like something, they'll tell you you like that. They'll tell you they like it. Recently, I came up with sort of a concept for a story, and I showed it to a couple of people that I trust, and the experience overall was really positive. Obviously, there will always be criticism. There is always, this idea isn't expanded upon enough. This idea feels like it's sort of being run dry. I don't understand why this is here, but I really like what you've done with this character. I like what you've done with this scene. I love the way you sketched this part. I love the way you did this. I love the way you did that. Sharing things and being able to take on advice is so much easier if you trust and enjoy and care about the people that you share it with. So remember, your work is valuable, and you shouldn't, Jesus fucking Christ, I've got to shut that shit off. The boys are trying to contact me again. Excuse me, I'm having a deep conversation. Excuse me, actually, no, I'm role-playing. Who in the audience? Excuse me, can we have our phones on silent, please? Excuse me, anyone over 50 in the audience, please turn off your messages. We're trying to have a talk here. But yes, editing your work can be painful, but it will be less painful if you trust the people that you're showing it to. And this sort of feeds into a lot of what I wanted to talk about in this part. Trust your friends, but also trust your vision. You need to remember that you had this idea for a reason. You didn't have it out of nowhere, and when you had it, it ignited a spark in you, and it made you really excited. That matters. That matters quite a bit. Your vision for this project or this idea is really important. If someone you trust tells you maybe you should change this about it, you can listen to them and you can understand them, but you don't necessarily need to act on it. It's the age-old saying, take it with a grain of salt, right? Listen to criticism and ingest it, but you don't necessarily need to act on all of it. Sometimes a person might have a really accurate idea of how to make your project a little bit better, but other times a person might not. They might have an idea of what they would want to personally see in your project, and in that case, you might look at it and think, you know what, no, that idea doesn't really fit, and I'm not going to act on it. Agency and decision-making are so important, and the best thing that you can do is trust your own judgment. Do your best not to feel as though your own ideas don't matter, because they really, really do. There's no such thing, I think, as an inherent lack of creativity. If you've gotten to this stage, You clearly have an interest in creating something. If that's true, then your vision for this work matters. You're not always going to be right about everything, but I think that you will know when that is. Sharing your work and allowing other people to come in with their ideas gives you the opportunity to evaluate what they say. Don't trust them blindly. Trust them to have your best interests at heart and trust them to value the work that you're creating, but also trust yourself. And that if someone tells you something, an idea that you personally don't really vibe with or don't really like, you don't need to act on it. And I think that's one of the most important things. Your vision is really, really important. This one is one a lot of people forget about. Look after yourself. A healthy mind is a healthy job. This is true for all things. This is true for non-creative jobs and for creative ones in all sorts of different ways. If you eat well and you get enough sleep and you look after yourself, you will inevitably be in a better situation and a better state of mind to make something you're working on better. There's a really upsetting idea out there about this idea of the starving artist. It's very much romanticized by all sorts of historians who might have looked at someone like Vincent van Gogh, for example, or by anyone who sort of looks up to a successful artist who has opened up about their struggles. One of the worst things that you can do is romanticize the idea of your own suffering. I'd like to really go out on a limb here and say that a lot of people who have insane creative ideas, really actually, barring our own sort of self-obsession, a lot of, probably the vast majority of the people on Earth have suffered enough as is. If you've made it this far in life to the point where you're seriously thinking about a career in the creative industries, you've probably had your heart broken a couple of times. You've probably been through a couple of really dangerous situations. You've probably been through a difficult situation with a friend. You've had enough suffering in your life that can inform and make your art better, because these experiences, while they're painful, they do help and they can serve as some inspiration. For me personally, a lot of the pain that I've been through in my life has served as inspiration for my works of art. You would take take New Sidonia, for example, my song cover. It's inspired by what happened to me 400 years ago when all of the people that I loved were destroyed in a terrible battle that left my castle burning in flames, and I left and fled like a coward. That is a part of my life, and that is some pain, and it's grown throughout my life, and now it is a work of art. However, that doesn't mean that you get to undervalue yourself and stop taking care of yourself just because you like the idea of pain creating good art. If you're starving, and if you're not sleeping well, and if you're depressed, a lot of the time the work that you're doing will suffer as a result. So all I'm saying is, a lot of the time, a really good quote actually that I've just remembered now is from a very successful screenwriter, the fantastic Aaron Sorkin, writer of The Social Network and The West Wing, among lots of other fantastic works of art. What he says is that in the case of writing, although I would like to say that this goes for a ton of other creative professions, in the case of writing, it is 5% of your time sitting down and actually putting words on a page, and 95% of the time wandering around your living space feeling depressed. A lot of it is not knowing what to do. You can use that time to take care of yourself, and when you do, and you return after having spent that time, suddenly your head can be clearer, and you might figure out exactly what it is that you need to put down. And that's important. The most important thing as well, of course, and I will remind you of this again in the final section, don't stop feeding your muse, ever. No matter how far along you are on the creative path, no matter how developed your idea feels, no matter how close it feels to being finished, don't stop feeding your muse. Don't stop consuming the art that you love, because every single time that you consume something, you watch something, you actively consume something that means something to you, you will become a stronger creator overall. You will become more informed, and you will have a better idea of what to do next. At any point during the development of your idea, you might, even when you thought you were 95% done, you were almost ready to put it out into the world, or in the case of some more complicated professions, to send it off and show it to other people and have it be sort of made. Even if you're that close, you might consume a piece of art that makes you think, God, I have another great idea. And you can put that in, and suddenly your work might be twice as good as it was before. No matter how busy you are, no matter how stressed you are, find an excuse anywhere you are. If you're on the bus, you can get your phone out and you can read a poem or a story or a short or something like that. If you're in bed and you can't sleep, you can watch a short film. If you have even an hour of spare time, you can watch an episode of award-winning television. If you have an afternoon free, you can go to an art gallery. If you have even 50 seconds free, you can open Pinterest or Instagram or Twitter, and you can not doom scroll and look at memes and feel sad about the state of the world, but maybe curate your online experience a bit and follow accounts that make art that you love. And then the instant you open it, instead of feeling depressed and instead of getting sucked into looking at something that's going to make you sad, you will just see all sorts of paintings and works of literature and films that make you feel inspired. And suddenly, you might be creating something even better than what you were creating before. And while you're in the stage of development, this is a very important thing to remember. It's okay to get sidetracked. Having an idea from the beginning and then rushing off and making it all in one and then putting it out there. For a lot of us, that might work for you. But during the idea stage, getting sidetracked and suddenly having another great idea, that's fine. I do that kind of thing all the time. I'll tell you a little story about me. You know, who would want to hear a story about me? But it's relevant. I would say around about a decade ago, before I developed a really strong interest in film, my interest was in literature, and I really enjoyed sort of writing stories in my spare time. I would have these ideas for what I had imagined would be books that I would publish one day, and I would do a lot of work on these. I would have outlines of the plot, I would have worlds and characters and all of that kind of stuff, and they would reach a decent length. I think one of them was about 50,000 words, another was 35. Get them to a certain length, 50,000, 35,000, 10,000, however many words it is. And then suddenly, I just stopped. Suddenly, while working on these ideas that I thought about and cared about all the time, very suddenly, I would think, I want to do something else now. And then I would go and do something else. The consequence of this is that none of those were ever finished. But what it meant was I was always having fun, and I was always creating something that I was enjoying. Chances are, if I had written 50,000 words of something and I couldn't bear to sit down and write anymore, it probably meant that I wasn't enjoying it all that much. Sometimes I would restart and I would try writing the same story all over again. Or I would have a new idea. I would have watched a film or read a book that would have inspired me in a different way. And I think, maybe I want to do something like that. And then I would go and do it. And eventually, one of those ideas will stick. Trust it. It will stick. And then maybe you'll finish it. And then you can move on to the next stage if you want to. What's important to remember about the stage of development is that it's really important not to worry about sticking to just one thing if it's boring you. Because if you're working on something and you're burnt out and you're bored, you're probably never going to finish it anyway, let alone are you going to enjoy it. And even if you manage to find some way of enjoying it, it's probably not going to be very good, to be honest. I'm going back to what I said at the very start of this section. Listen to your heart. If your heart looks at something you've made and it's like, ugh, it needs changes. That's just the way this works. Creativity comes from the heart. It comes from what we want to do and from what we want to see in the spaces we're inspired by. If I wanted to make a film, it's a film that I would want to sit down and watch in a theater. If I was to write a book, it's a book that I would want to see on a bookshelf in a bookstore. If thinking about that makes you, ugh, maybe it's time to either start something new or go back to the beginning and start it over again, or just edit. Remember what I said about when it's okay to be wrong? Sometimes just changing a few words around can be good. Sometimes if you've drawn someone's face and it doesn't look quite right, erasing the face and trying again is completely fine. Or starting a new whip as well. I see all sorts of artists on Twitter who have this sort of running joke about hiding the several hundred whips that they have. And I'm here to hit you with a really important piece of information. Every time that you've drawn a work in progress and never finished it, you still learn something. Think about that. Every work of art that you make is not necessarily one that needs to be published. Every story that you write doesn't need to be put between some covers and put in a bookstore. Not every script that you think you want to write needs to be made into a film. Sometimes the process of writing something, the process of drawing something, or of making anything, that alone will empower and strengthen the next thing that you make. If you're an artist with 200 unpublished work in progress draft tweets, why are you ashamed of that? You've drawn and had inspiration for 200 different things. Just because you didn't finish them doesn't mean you're not a good artist. It doesn't mean you're not motivated. No, not at all. What it means is you were inspired, you had fun, and you learned something. Your next work is going to be a lot better as a result of having worked on something before. So being sidetracked and letting yourself follow your heart at all moments, even if you've got one idea that's really far along in the pipeline and you feel like it's almost ready. It's getting so close to the point where you really want to start actually putting it to paper and making it into a real thing. Even if you're close to that, if you want to do something else, go for it. Just do it. Do what the heart wants. If you're focused and want to finish it, do it. If you want to change course, what if you were writing a horror story and you thought, you know what, maybe this needs some romance, and then you decide to make the movie monster really, really hot. You can do that. Who is anyone to tell you that you can't do whatever it is you want to do with your own work? It's still just on a page, and most of it is probably still inside your head. And no one else gets to mess with what's in there apart from you. This is as much of the advice for developing an idea as I could think of. So the next step is the hard part, and that is execution. With any idea, they don't always need to be created. Sometimes as I was talking about, the act of making something and the act of thinking about it can strengthen your abilities as a creative person so much that it's valuable in and of itself to just work on something. For me, I have all sorts of little Google Docs and scripts and stuff which I wrote from the beginning with the intention of never showing anybody. I just did it for myself. And you best believe no one will ever get to find those. You can do that too. You can intentionally start something you never get to finish, but then perhaps if it takes on a new form and you start to really enjoy it, maybe you do want to finish it. It's also okay to start something that you desperately want to make into something real and to then change course and treat it as a point of personal growth. All of that and all of these different parts of the process, creating something, even creating something that you look back on and think, God, that was really bad. Because I've done that a ton of times. What happened was you learned. End of story. So, let's say you've made it past that step. Let's say you've gotten past all of these different worms running around inside your head and you found one that you love and you've managed to see it all the way through. Let's say if you've got a script, maybe you want to make it into a film. Let's say if you've got a sort of an idea for a song, maybe you want to find a producer and make an instrumental, get it mixed and make it into something you can publish. Maybe if it's a work of art, maybe you want to take it a step further. Maybe you've already drawn it and you want someone else to add to it. Maybe you want it to be a part of something larger. Maybe this one drawing served as the inspiration for an entire story, like a comic or something similar. If that's true, we need to think about the process of executing it. One of the most important things that I've learned recently, I need some water, hold on. One of the most important things that I've learned, especially recently, is to do research and to do thorough research and to understand that you need to sometimes understand that the information that you might want to believe might not necessarily be true. I was humbled a lot recently because I had a meeting with some very exciting people while I was in LA about the potential of working on a project together, and I was inquiring about some research that I had done about the budgetary implications of what I was doing, and I said, I read somewhere that it would cost about this much, and they said, no, that's like 5% of what it would cost, and I was like, ugh. So a lot of the information that you might find online tends not to be true. A lot of it can just be put out there for the sense of sensationalism. Believe it or not, someone might go out on the internet and just tell lies. So what can we do about this? Networking is really, 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 really hard. And especially, I think for a lot of people who want to find themselves in a creative sector, what you can wind up being is something called an introvert. And introverts struggle with networking even more than the average person does. But there comes a point where if you care enough and if you really want to get something made, sometimes you need to step out of your comfort zone and you really need to force yourself down this road. Now, you can either do this yourself or you can find a friend to help you. Remember, I talked about trusting your friends. If you have a good network and a good social circle of people that you care about you and that you care about, getting them on board, someone that you trust is more important than anything. So if you trust them and if they trust you, they can help you with this part if they feel a little bit more confident. When it comes to actually contacting people who know what they're talking about, let's say, for example, you wanted to make a song. You've written the lyrics, you've figured out what it would sound like, but you need let's say you need a music video. We had a really fantastic music video the other day. I'm terrible. What is the name of that song? Otono Naru Hoe, one of the most exciting projects I've ever been involved in, has a fantastic music video, right? Sometimes what you'll need to do is admit to yourself, well, listen, I have not had the luxury of, I can only really hold one language at a time. I don't really want to go out killing again. But you know what I mean. Thank you. Contacting people is important. And so at some point, you need to accept that you don't have the ability to do everything by yourself. Pomu, when working on that song, was working incredibly hard. Incredibly hard. And she spent a lot of money on it as well. If she had taken it upon, hypothetically, I know that she wouldn't have tried this, but hypothetically, if she had tried to do everything herself, animate the music video, compose the song, and then do all of the vocals by herself, she would be substantially more overworked than she was in the end. She did a load of incredible work and knew just who to talk to in order to make it possible in the time that she wanted to release it. And it turned out to be a massive success. When you try to contact people in the creative industries, it helps to know people going into it. And this can be a bit of a roadblock for many people. And so for this, I think it's really important to start with something smaller. And I'll talk a bit more about that later in the next slide. But essentially with Do Your Research, what I'm trying to say is that there's nothing wrong with sending emails, making phone calls, trying to get in touch with people who might know what it will take in order to get your project made. It's not always easy. And typically in the spheres that I've been in, especially in sort of film, TV, the rule of thumb is that you'll get a reply to an email 20 emails in. You will have sent off 20 emails. Maybe only one of them will get back to you. But if you can abandon the sense of anxiety, and if you can abandon the sense that you're bothering people, and if you just keep trying to get in touch with the people that matter, eventually you might be able to have a conversation with someone who can set you on the right track. And that will be really, really good for the future of your project. But like I was saying, when you're just starting out, some of you might have a lot of experience with publishing your work, but some of you might still have yet to do anything like it. This comes more from my perspective as a filmmaker, but you need to know your limits. I'm not saying that you need to know your limits in terms of your creativity, because beforehand, when we were talking about developing the idea, there are no limits to what you can come up with. There are no limits to the kind of things that you can have ideas about. Your head and your mind is boundless, and you can do whatever you want. But when it comes to actually executing it, one of the biggest constraints you can have are time, budget, and if we're honest, sometimes what we might imagine ourselves to be able to do by ourselves isn't quite what we're able to do at that point in our lives. So you need to humble yourself and know your limits. One of the worst things that can happen in one of the worst things that can happen, and I'll speak from experience in an environment where, let's say, you're making a film. When you go to film university, there are a lot of bright-eyed students who enter a film university thinking, I am going to be the next Steven Spielberg. I am going to be the next Stanley Kubrick. Not yet, you're not. One point that I'm going to go into later is that there is no set person who's going to become a set thing. All of this is up in the air, and it's down to who can actually do the shit that's going to, live up to those kinds of expectations. It's a very silly expectation to want to live up to, because it doesn't matter at the end of the day. And by being so confident in your own abilities, you're limiting your capacity to learn. So what a lot of these people tend to do is they'll be given a camera and they say, all right, for this assignment, this semester, what you've got to do is make like a film that's 5 minutes long and has a plot that's something to do with this. And someone who doesn't know better will say, right, what I'm going to do is create a brand new fantasy world, and I'm going to build these highly detailed sets, and I'm going to have a plot that's deeply political with all of these different factions from around this fantasy world, and they're all going to collide, and then everything is going to consummate in a giant battle. And what you fail to realize is that you're working on a micro or zero budget that you would need to get all of the people to be a part of that you would need to get people to make costumes, that you would need to get people to make sets. It's a very complicated process, and if you think it's all just going to fall right into your hands, you're wrong. One of the best things that you can do is, it's the title of this slide, know what you can do within your limits. Think about your limits and let those push you even further, because limitation can, now a lot of you know this already, but trust the process here, a lot of limitations can make you more creative. Sometimes, let's say your idea to begin with was a horror story, right? And you wanted to make that into a film, or you wanted to publish it in some way, but then when you get around to it, you just don't have the budget or the crew available to make it what you wanted it to be. So think about the idea that you already have, and think about what parts of it you can make happen with the limitations that you have. Remember what I said about doing research? Well, networking and speaking with people in a similar space can help you get around people who might want to help. If you're making something for free, let's say if you're at school or if you're at university and it's a part of an assignment, there will be others who want to be a part of your crew who also want to work for free, and they might have talents that you don't have. Maybe you've got a talent for writing, but someone else in your nearby vicinity has a talent for makeup. Suddenly, you've got someone who can turn another person who might have a passion for acting into your movie monster, and suddenly you've solved one part of the problem. Instead of going online and trying to find like, okay, the average movie monster costume costs $50,000 and takes 3 hours of makeup to take on and put off, I'm going to be honest, you're already reaching way too far into the future. You might one day, if you're successful, maybe one day you'll get to make something like that, but suddenly hitting yourself with this stupidly ambitious idea when you don't have the means to create it, you're only holding yourself back. So try and find a way of bringing your idea down to earth and try and find a way of making it possible. Now, of course, ambition, don't let this crush your ambitions, right? Because perhaps your first step, making something simple that you have the budget for, that you have the time and the people for, perhaps if you listen to your limits and perhaps if it can be good enough within its limits, perhaps that can be a tool that will push you further in your career. And then one day, the original idea in all of its grandeur, every single thing that you would have imagined to be possible might in the future be possible. Works of art can be stepping stones to other greater works of art. A lot of you may know about a very famous short film called Lights Out. For me personally, an absolute nightmare of a film that I never want to watch again. Lights Out began as a 3-odd-minute short film that was made very, very simplistically. It was done really creatively with cuts and simple effects, and it was shot in someone's house. All they had was a really good idea that was so possible within the constraints of the filmmakers. It was made, it was immensely successful because it was a good idea and because they listened to their limits, and now Lights Out has been adapted into a full-length feature film. Another great example, The Backrooms. Everybody's heard of The Backrooms, but what you may not know is that the most successful example on YouTube of a film based on The Backrooms was made by, I believe, then 17-year-old who was having fun with his friends trying to make something that they were inspired by. They listened to their limits, the effects are quite convincing, but still pretty simple, and now that 17-year-old has been recruited by, I believe, either Blumhouse or A24 to make a feature-length Backrooms movie at the age, I believe now, of 18. You realize how possible all of your dreams are when you realize that all you have to do is put your energy into something that you can actually do. And one day, something that you thought you might never be able to do becomes a whole lot more possible. This idea of knowing your limits is very, very important. Someday, if your career explodes and you have all the budget you've ever wanted, then you'll be able to go back to the drawing board and think, right, what's an idea that I've always wanted to make if I had the money and the time? Maybe then, once you've gone through the ringer and you've listened to your limits, maybe then you'll be ready for it. It's also important to remember that your limitations include what you can do as, with your skills, because no matter how talented you think you are, there will always be space to learn. A lot of you who might have listened to my ASMR think that I'm, really, really good at improv, but the truth is that this has come after a lot of early attempts which were really, really bad and very, very simple as well. And that also came after a load of times where I would write things and never finish them. And when I look back on those on those writings now, when I look back on the books that I was trying to write and I read some of the sentences that I put on paper, I think, what the fuck was I thinking? But I went from that step to here now, and I recognize that that is because at the time, I just knew my limits. Find people you trust. This is a lot similar to what I've said before, but it needs to sort of be reiterated in the new context of trying to make something larger that, you might not have been able to do so beforehand. Sometimes all it takes is someone else, maybe someone who's better at networking than you are. Maybe it takes someone who's better at let's say my experiences with film. So obviously I'm speaking from a personal perspective, but maybe you'll meet someone who is better at something else than you are, right? So trust them and communicate with them on your work and what you want to happen. And yes, it's difficult, really difficult, but when you find someone you want to trust, you'll know. And there are steps you can take to protect yourself, obviously, with stuff like NDAs and creator contracts and stuff, which also helps to meet someone who knows law better than you do, because then sometimes it can dissuade a potentially bad actor from running off with your idea, which, to be fair, as long as there's at least a little bit of proof. I'll give you a quick lesson, actually, because this is important to remember. A lot of people don't remember this kind of thing. There's a huge difference between copyright and a trademark, and a sort of a registered trademark, right? Copyright applies to any idea that a person has had. If you've thought of it, if it's in your head, you have ownership of that idea immediately. You don't need to write it down. You don't need to file it off at some office. You don't need to, if you think up of a title for a book you want to write, you don't need to get that trademarked. You don't need to file it in at some office. Legally, it is already yours. If you explain your concept for a story to someone and suddenly they run off and make it themselves, you can, with even the slightest bit of evidence, can dispute that and say, hey, that was my idea, and you legally would be in the right. So remember that. A trademark is something that you apply and register. So a trademark is something that you apply and register. It tends to be for a specific product or a specific logo or a brand. But when it comes to ideas, concepts, that is your intellectual property, and it belongs 100% to you the moment that you have thought of it. And if someone tries to tell you that, well, you should have written it down, or no, you should have applied for this, you should have sent it off to the office, you should have done this, they're lying to you. Your ideas are yours. And as long as you have even the slightest way of proving it from earlier, writing your ideas down, dates on those documents, hand those in, they can verify that, and suddenly, as long as it matches up, you're in the right. Don't let people lie to you, and don't let them take you for a fool. This is why earlier I said, do your research, because you don't want to fall foul of things like this. Find people that you trust, but remember to protect yourself in the instance that someone you trust might not be trustworthy anymore. It can be a really difficult thing in the creative industries because everyone is trying to get their piece of the pie. Everyone is trying to climb to the top in one way or another. Everyone wants their own vision to come true. And sometimes this can foster an environment that is deeply competitive, sometimes to the point of pure toxicity, because everyone wants to believe that they're going to be the next. Everyone wants to believe that their idea is going to be the one that works, because let's face it, we know the statistics. We know how few people wind up in the creative industries. But I'm going to go out and, I'll talk more about this later. But I've come to understand recently that I think that while there is a lot of luck involved in becoming a part of the creative industries, creating your own luck makes it a lot more possible than you might think. When we hear about this idea of someone fantasizing about becoming an artist, and maybe your parents have said, no, you need to become a lawyer instead. No, you need to become a doctor. They most likely just want what's best for you and don't want you to get your heart broken. But in this day and age, it's never been more possible for you to really push and actually make that career a reality. So don't give up. Now, this one is really fucking important, and I want you all to bear this in mind. This applies to any time that you're working with more than just yourself. If you're writing a book, you don't necessarily have a team. Maybe you've got a publicist. Maybe you've got someone who's drawing the cover, but they tend to be less involved in the production of the story than, let's say, if you were co-writing it. So for this example, imagine you're on a film set, or you're in a group or you're in a band, right? This is a really big thing that will kick you in the shins and will stop you from making any progress if you fall afoul of your own ego in this instance. And I don't care who you are or how perfect you think you are, everyone has an ego, and every creative person specifically wants to believe that their work is good. Sometimes when you're put into a group with lots of other people, you can try to suppress and put down the vision of those people that you're working with. It's different if you're commissioning somebody. If you're the producer and your money is what's making the project happen, that's different. If you're funding it, you have the final say on everything. It helps, I think, that if you're more of a money person, to listen to the more creative types about what will make it better. But at the end of the day, if it's your money, it is your choice. When it comes to something that's been funded from somewhere else, and you are, let's say, a director who is working with a producer who's working with a writer and an actor, every creative person will bring their own ideas to the table. And if you stop and you shut them down constantly, then chances are they'll hate you and the project won't turn out very well at all. I won't say leave your ego at the door, because self-confidence and believing that you have the right idea can be a really, really good way of making things work. But being controlling and stopping people from suggesting things, that's how you wind up with a terrible team environment, and that's how you wind up with a project that nobody wants to be a part of. People's passion for a project is always reflected heavily in the final project. If people are overworked and if they just can't get into the thing that they're making, if you've come up with the script and this idea and you're sort of forcing people to work on it in exactly the way you want them to work on it, if they don't like the way that's going, they're probably not going to put their all in, and then the quality overall will suffer. So do you remember what I said earlier about trusting your friends but also trusting your vision? Find that balance and take people's comments with a grain of salt. Think, perhaps that's the right idea, or debate with them. When someone says, I think we should do this, really, truly think about what they're saying and be open to having your ideas challenged. Because sometimes, remember what I said earlier? It's okay to be wrong. Well, that's because everyone at some point is wrong. All of you, myself included, have had an idea that's turned out to be a piece of shit. Everyone's thought of doing something that makes sense at the time, and then when you actually do it, you think, that was really, really dumb. Be open to the fact that this can happen. So in this sense, I guess, yeah, leave your ego at the door and allow for these things to happen. If someone comes up to you and says, hey, listen, I really don't like the direction this is going in, instead of being offended and saying, why would you say that? What's wrong with it? Ask them, what makes you say that? Ask them, oh, really? What is it about it? And then really try to just push that disappointed part of yourself down and really, really think about what it is they're trying to say, because they just might be absolutely right. And in that instance, if you weren't able to listen, and if you were just shutting down their advice at every turn, you would wind up making a project with a worse version of the project than it would be if you had just listened. Now, it's also true that sometimes a person might say this and you can really think about it and value their opinion, but still decide, no, I really think we should do it my way. And in that case, that's fine. You are still a very inviting and inclusive leader who wants their team to feel valued. It's good to listen to ideas even if they aren't necessarily what you wind up going with. Don't stop yourself from listening to people. Don't stop yourself from rejecting their ideas, but also don't stop yourself from accepting them. Again, you, right now, at this position in your career, if you're listening to this talk, you probably want inspiration and advice on starting something new, probably. Or maybe you're halfway through something, but I'm willing to bet that people who are already immensely, wildly successful probably don't have much use from listening to advice from someone like me, who's on that journey as well, just kind of halfway along, maybe a third, quarter, 20, 10, 5%. Nobody knows. But accept the fact that at this point in your life, in your career as a creative practitioner, you don't necessarily always know best. Your vision matters, and what you want to do matters, but you might not always be right. And sometimes when you're proven wrong, and when you listen to an idea and you think that might be good, you learn something, and then maybe you will bring that idea to the next thing that you work on, and you'll make that even better next time. So to round off this part, listen to your teammates, value what they say, and be prepared to evaluate what their advice is with honesty. Being a leader is difficult, but all it takes is trusting that what you have is good and being open to the fact that it can absolutely be better. This is a big one. This is a really big one. Sometimes when you're ambitious about something, you must understand that it can take a long, long time to work out. And in this sense, what I would say is this is why getting sidetracked is fun when you're coming up with ideas, because sometimes what can happen with a certain project is that it can get stuck in sort of a development hell where perhaps you need to send it off, you need to acquire the rights to use certain things. This can take some time. Sometimes you need to send emails. This can take some time. Sometimes there's a certain process that you need to just leave in someone else's hands, and it can just take some time. In my instance, I'll tell you that I came up with an idea for a story that I really loved and cared about, and that I still do 10 years ago. And the only thing that I've done with this story so far is write a basic script and come up with a Spotify playlist with a song for every scene, or most of them anyway. It's because the idea is so big and it's so ambitious, and I know my limits. I recognize that it's probably not going, if it ever does get made, if I was ever fantastically lucky enough to get it made, it wouldn't be for a long time. And so I have to accept that different things will come in between. And this is a really important piece of advice that a lot of us need to really take on board. And it can be quite, heartbreaking. And when I first heard this piece of advice, I was tempted to just sort of say, nah. But really, really take this on board, okay? This might be one of the most important things that I tell you tonight, okay? Don't get distracted by your dream. And I'll tell you what that means. If you are on one straight, narrow road where you can see your dream project, your dream job, way off in the distance, my purpose in life, I want to make this film. My purpose in life, I want to draw something that's hung in an art gallery. My purpose in life, I want to write a successful series of fantasy novels that's going to have a theme park and all of that. Think about it. Great. Dream about it. Dreams are important. They will guide you. But you, and I mean this, you will never be able to account for the opportunities and the experiences that will appear in your life in between. You don't need to beeline it straight for the finish line. You can take your time. I'll tell you the biggest example that all of you are very fucking well aware of. If I had been so laser focused on my dream of becoming a filmmaker, I would never have joined NIJISANJI. And because of joining NIJISANJI, I am now closer than ever to being able to actually make a film. Really think about that. Being aware of new, exciting opportunities in your periphery, things that are surrounding you. If you block them out and think, nope, I'm just going straight for the finish line, you might miss some of the greatest opportunities that you've ever come across. Right now, I am making more film-like stuff than I think I ever would be if I had gone for a traditional career, because these careers are so crushing and making your way into this industry is so difficult. I have been incredibly lucky and incredibly privileged to have had this opportunity, but I have to also admit to myself that the only reason I had this opportunity is because I allowed myself to look for it, is because I allowed myself to find new experiences along the way. What started with this job as, oh, this will be a fun little side gig that I can do while I'm working on my film career, suddenly became the biggest focus of my entire life. And suddenly it has been paired and it has merged with my dream of someday becoming a filmmaker. And I am, like I said, closer now, and if anything, right now, working on projects that are of a size and scope that I would only dream of happening in the next 10, 30, 40 years had I been working on a traditional career, making my way up from the bottom. And I recognize I am an exception, and I am extremely fortunate. Sometimes you may not be as fortunate as I am, and it feels bad to be able to say that, yeah, sometimes luck is a huge part of the equation. But what I need to impress upon you is that you won't find your way to the end if you don't consider the obstacles or the shortcuts that are on that path. So, I mean, I'm in my position and I'm happy and I feel creatively fulfilled and I feel able to, I have a network now, I feel capable of contacting people with talents far beyond anything I could imagine doing in certain sectors, and I can say, hey, I have an idea, do you want to work on it? Here's the budget, here's the script, let's make it happen. And suddenly I can do that. And it could have taken a lot longer, but I look a lot more like the guy on the left than I do the guy on the right, because I was open to different paths, and so should you be. If your dream is to make some grand fantasy adventure and then immediately have it adapted into a film and then suddenly have it become, just overtake the entire world with its success, you may be disappointed. But if you let yourself get sidetracked and you come up with an idea for something smaller, maybe publishing that story will give you the street cred and will give you the network to then try and publish something a little bit more ambitious. Maybe it'll sell more copies. Maybe it might get optioned to be adapted. Maybe it'll become a radio show. Maybe, just maybe, it might even be adapted for something bigger. Don't give up on your dream that's in the distance, but remember that it will take time. Now, this is a really big one that's sort of close to the end, so don't worry, we're almost there, and you can all go and use the bathroom in a moment and check your phones. But when it comes to when a creative idea is fully out there, so let's say if you're at the start of a career, like let's say you've always wanted to write a book. What you've done is you've written a book. You've gone from the ideas stage where you thought of all of these scenes, came up with characters, came up with a world, with environments, with unique stuff, just anything that you thought that would make a great story. You've written it, you've executed it, you've gotten in touch with publishers, you've gotten in touch with someone to design a cover for it, everything. You've done all sorts of different things. Will it be a success or will it fail? It's impossible to say. There are fantastic, groundbreaking works of art that bomb financially. There are pieces of shit that will earn $1 billion in the box office. Unfortunately, there is a correlation between good art and successful art, but it doesn't always happen. Sometimes you might have created something beautiful, but it might not necessarily blow up in the way that you were imagining. And this is completely heartbreaking. Absolutely, completely soul-destroying. And you need to be ready for that. You need to be ready for the fact that sometimes, eventually, you might run into a situation when everything that you thought would happen and everything you had been relying on happening might not just come to pass in the way that you're expecting. But remember what I said. Don't beeline it straight for the finish line. Life has lots of winding, twisting paths. You might have gone off into a dead end. You might have taken a wrong turn at some point. But remember what it says at the top of the screen. Don't let failure stop you. If you loved that work of art that you made, if you showed it to people you trusted and they loved that work of art, there is value in your work, and there is value inherently in your mind. There is value inherently in your creativity and what you're capable of creating. There is value always. Even if you made something bad before, even if you made something bad first, we're all capable of making things that are bad, and we're all capable of making things that are good. If anything, there's no better learning tool than making something that's bad. If you fail and you learn how to pick yourself back up and be like, okay, I'm going to try again, then I think you've got what it takes. It's very, very difficult, extremely difficult, but God, if it isn't the mark of an incredible artist, to take failure and look it in the eyes and say, all right, sure, I'm going to learn and I'm going to try again. The same thing applies to success. Let's say, going back to the hypothetical of the book you might have been writing, let's say it's a massive success. Let's say you write a story and suddenly it becomes hugely successful and you start earning money off of it. And let's say you start to get offered deals, and sure, your career is now on a steady track towards that dream at the end of the tunnel. But maybe there comes a point when all that people will ask you for is the sequel to your first book. Maybe they say, well, what happens to them next? And in your mind, you thought, well, that was the end. And then maybe you think, well, maybe I should start doing the same thing over and over again. Or maybe you obsess over the idea of what your audience wants. Maybe you obsess over the idea of of one-upping yourself. It's not always possible. And sometimes this can create a depressive loop of, I fell off, I've lost my spark, I don't have what it takes anymore. That can just stop you dead in your tracks from creating something ever again. There's such a thing as a one-hit wonder, and a lot of the time people can enjoy massive success but struggle to replicate it. And this can be just as crushing as failing in the first place. Exactly. This is, in a sense, a failure of its own kind. But of course, there is no definite end. Burnt out gifted kid syndrome, exactly. You have too high expectations of yourself and you suddenly just start to rewind and think like, well, I'm making money off my book now. I'll just relax. I don't need to try anymore. And then suddenly that dream starts to get, that bright future of yours starts to get a little bit more dim. No matter your situation, whether you're successful, unsuccessful, rich or poor, or confident or unconfident, what you can do, regardless, is pick yourself up and keep trying. In the case of the successful person on the left, what you might be able to do is think, well, everyone wants a sequel from my original story, but I don't really want to do that. Remember what I said about following your heart? When you follow your heart, you'll think, well, maybe I do want to do something different. Maybe I should work on my next thing. You've already got more of an advantage than you had when you started, and you did it the first time. It stands to reason that you can probably do it again. Your name will now be able to sell something new, and maybe it's not as successful. Well, then you're in the point of the person on the right, and you think, well, let me try again. And you try again, and again, and again, and eventually you have a body of work. You have created worlds, characters, stories, and environments that exist in the hearts and minds of people all over the world. And all it took was really, really believing that you could do it. So I'll reiterate it again. If you fail, if you get all the way to the end and what you wanted to happen doesn't happen, you can always try again. If you do succeed, but you feel yourself going into a rut and then finding yourself falling towards obscurity, you can always try again. There are no limits to what can be successful. And if you're in the position of the person on the left, remember that the world loves a good comeback story. Think about Brendan Fraser, who completely disappeared, no fault of his own, by the way, from the world of Hollywood and returned to critical acclaim and love from audiences and critics alike, and won an Oscar. No matter what stage you're at in your creative career, perhaps you're watching this as someone who has found success in the past, but you're in that kind of valley and you're wondering, where do I go next? Well, remember, if you feel like you've lost your spark, if you feel like you've peaked in life, you don't know that. And that leads me into my final point. The future is not set. There is always a chance. This is so important. Do you remember what I said about people going into film school and saying, I'm going to be the next Spielberg, I'm going to be the next Tarantino, I'm going to be the next Kubrick? Maybe they will be. The future isn't set. We don't know what's going to happen. There is no looking into the future and seeing what your fate is. I mean, maybe you believe in fate, maybe you don't. Me personally, I like to believe that things just kind of happen. And this, to me, makes me feel a lot more free to think that I have control and agency over what will happen in my life. So, success is always possible. If you start at square one, if you feel that you have absolutely no talent whatsoever, hold on, good place to start. I need water. If you feel that you have no talent whatsoever, if you feel that you have no experience, if you've never really, maybe you want to write a book. What if you've never read a book before in your life? And then you suddenly think to yourself, I want to be the next Neil Gaiman. I want to be the next, why am I struggling to think of the names of authors? I don't know. What's a good author? Give me, someone in the audience, give me an author. Stephen King. I want to be the next Stephen King. John Arbor? I want to be the next Stephen King. I want to be the next Jane Austen. Exactly. Who's to say they can't? Even if they have no experience, have no bearing on their talent, if they just decide, well, maybe I can, who are we to tell them it's not possible? And if someone's already well on their track to on track to their career, and they think, well, I'm going to be the next big thing, who are we to tell them they won't be? I think that there's this idea that we have that we sort of look into the future and we wonder, what if I'm not a success? And the simple fact of the matter is there is no way of knowing whether you will or won't be. But to me, this brings me far more comfort than the idea that my fate being set in stone. Whenever I used to look into the future and really desperately want some kind of creative career, what I would worry about is, what if I'm setting myself up for failure? What if it's already been set that I'm just one of those guys who falls off to the wayside and someone else stands on the shoulders of to have their success, and I fall off and nobody remembers me? That no one can say that will happen. Even if somebody did do that to you, even if you were sort of overtaken by someone who forgot about you in some way, who's to say that you can't keep going? Who's to say that you can't keep trying? I don't really think that unless you've literally been completely barred from entry in some way, that you've ever truly failed. You might have failed at one given project. You might have failed at one given idea. But you still have a chance to work your way back around and get to where you want to be. So just don't get too distracted by how far ahead some other people are. Like I mentioned earlier, the kid who's directing the Backrooms movie, right? He's 18, or 17 maybe. It's easy for us. I mean, I know a lot of people will look at the work that someone younger than them will be doing. Think about how I fucking feel. And you'll think, God, why can't I do that? I mean, you're losing track of what's important. Everyone is at a different stage in their journey, and you're on yours, and they're on theirs. Just because someone else was immensely successful in the early stages of their life doesn't mean that they will be later on. Just because you might have taken a while to find your footing and figure out what you really, really want to do doesn't necessarily mean that you will never make it. There's no such thing as truly having failed unless you decide, well, I'm throwing in the towel, I'm going to go get a real job. Not to say that creative industries aren't real jobs. I would be a massive fucking hypocrite if I said that, but that's often kind of the perception from some people who don't know better, right? If you say, I'm going to go get a normal job, I'm going to go get a desk job, I'm going to go get a some other kind of corporate job, whatever, that, well, even then you might change your mind in the future, and then you've still got a chance. This is the kind of the thought that I want to leave you with before we end for the day. And we'll do a few questions. Someone asked if there was going to be like a Q&A, and I figured that might be a nice idea, actually. So we'll do that for a little while after I finish. But this is my final thing that I want to say to you. There is no one on earth who can tell you the truth and the depth and the complexity of the ideas that will be had by everyone else on earth. The ideas that you have in your head, the things that you want to do, the life that you want to live exists purely and exclusively in your own mind, and no one knows what you can truly do except yourself. And even then, you really would be surprised by what you're capable of. Don't make your mind up about what it is you are or are not capable of, because what you're not capable of can change with time. What your situation is in life can change with time. Be open to opportunities, look for things around you, and keep the vision that you've always wanted in your head. And you never know when one day you might stumble into the right place at the right time. You might see a job listing that kind of fits what you want, and suddenly they welcome you in with open arms. You might suddenly be found to be remarkably interesting by someone who's already far ahead in their journey, and they take you by the hand and take you on their journey with them, bringing you up to their level. There are so many ways that you can get lucky, but getting lucky will only happen if you really try, and you try and make the things that you love. Remember that it's possible, and that if you don't give up, I feel that a lot of you will make it. I really think that a lot of you will make it if you just keep trying. And that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. This has been a really interesting experience for me. I didn't go into this with sort of a specific script or a plan, but I think I did a pretty good job. Let's open the floor for questions, shall we? If anyone has an idea of something they'd like to ask about with relevance to this talk, then you're more than welcome to go and hit me up in, let's say, raise your hand, but no, just ask a question if you have one. If there's something personal to you that makes you feel as though you want to walk away from this knowing something more personal, then go ahead and ask. That's completely up to you. But otherwise, that's all the advice that I have. Applause. Thank you very much, everybody. I have the applause sound effect. I can play that real quick. Where is it? Yes, thank you. I feel like the picture of Obama giving himself a medal. How do you avoid the love of your friends being gone if they hate you after you show them your work and find out? I'm going to hit you with a piece of honesty. If you show someone your work and they actively hate you for that work, you need to get some better fucking friends. You're not in the right environment, I'm sorry. If you show a piece of art, if they were a good friend, they would say, with honesty, they would say, listen, I just really don't think there's much here. Let's talk about how we can make it better. That's what a real friend would say. If a friend hates you as a person for something you've made, get rid of them. They don't deserve you. All right. New question from Beppy. Thank you very much. How do you gain reach? Is it just luck when you start from very little? It's a lot of luck in some sectors, but then in other sectors, it can tend to just be a lot of hard work. One of the best examples, I think, of something that you can just do by yourself is writing. If you wanted to write a book and wanted to get it published, you can do the 90% of the production of that creative thing all by yourself if you just have a laptop. I mean, Jane Austen wrote all of her books by hand. It was grueling work, and she had to write 2 copies of them each, by hand, but she still did that. It's a lot of hard work, but the better your work is and the places that you find to publish it, it all comes down to research, essentially, and it comes down to networking. If you know who to talk to, what I would say the right way of finding someone to talk to, going to a place of education tends to be good. Finding classes to go to tends to be good, because these are frequented by people who are looking for people like you with talent who might not know where to go. And then once you have the first little bit of reach, once you know one person who can get you into the right office, get you into the right meeting, put you in an elevator for your pitch, it will just snowball from there. And suddenly people who have less reach than you will be looking to you, and suddenly you can leverage that, and then you can start building teams, and people will be passionate about working with you. It's a lot more complicated than that, and it takes quite a while, but that's kind of the long and short of it, is that it takes time, but it's absolutely possible. Not you, thank you very much. I've been drawing my whole life, but excess drawing tasks for uni killed my passion for it. I want to get back to it, but I'm struggling. How would you overcome this if you had such a situation? This is a really good question because I was very much the same way. I had lots of creative projects on the go before I went to university, and then I was working so hard while I was at university. Film course had me working hard, believe it or not, and I did forget about it for a long time. There are lots of different things that you can do here. You can try and do both at the same time. You can try and find space to work on something for yourself. But if you're working day in and day out on your university work, the main thing that I'll tell you is that you're not going to be at university forever, and you're never going to get too old to go back to your dreams. One day, this happened to me. I'll tell you something really interesting. I actually applied for NIJISANJI, I think one day after one of my university semesters ended. It had been a real fucking slog. It was extremely difficult, right? And I thought like, oh, I'm just going to rest. I'm going to do nothing for the longest time. The next day I got up, I thought, fuck, I want to do something. And that was the day that I applied for NIJISANJI, and it was a success. Be open to the fact that if creativity feels like a massive slog, you're either not working on the right thing or your life isn't being tailored to a way that encourages creativity. Sometimes if you need to wait until you're in a better place, your creativity isn't going to wither up and die in the meantime. Taking your time can work just fine. I have taken my time a lot of the time. There was a long period of my life where I did absolutely nothing, or I didn't write anything down. But I'm at a point now where I'm doing lots more of that. So try and do what you can, and remember that following your heart and listening to what you're comfortable with is really important. However, remember that you won't be in this situation forever, and there will come a point when you'll have all the time in the world to work on things that you care about, and that's when you can really start to take off. What are we going to do at this time if you no longer have the ability to trust anyone but yourself after having been hurt by a friend? This is an age-old problem, and I have had this as well. It's extremely difficult sometimes when you've been through a difficult situation with someone and you want to be able to trust someone, but you just can't bring yourself to. Sometimes you can feel like you want to be able to have a friend that you can trust, and you want to be able to feel like, hey, I want to share this idea with them, but there's something that stops you. There's that anxiety that you learned from a previous experience. And that's rough, right? This, I'm afraid, has no easy answer. The best thing that I would recommend, actually, if you're experiencing debilitating trust issues, is therapy. And I think that everybody should be going to therapy, personally. And I also think that therapy should be free, but that is a conversation for another time. If you can find a way of going to therapy, there are programs in all sorts of places where you can sort of find a way to get it funded, and you can, it is costly, and that's the problem. And that's why I say there's no easy answer. Going to therapy is important for working out your problems, but at some points, I think that perhaps a different process is necessary. For example, if you feel as though you can't trust anybody, but you want to get feedback on a work of art, what I would say is take measures to protect yourself. Let's say you want to share a chapter from a story, or in your case, maybe you want to share a painting. Maybe just share the sketch. If you're worried they're going to steal it, just show them the sketch and ask, like, what do you want me to do with the shape of this? And if they're weird about it, and if they tell you something like, and they don't give you, and you get advice that feels like it's not constructive and it's just mean, probably not a good friend. And just leave it alone, and then they don't have access to that art to do anything weird with it if you struggle to trust them. If you're writing a story, maybe just show someone one chapter. Just show them the prologue at the beginning. And then, maybe, if they do earn your trust, then you can show them a little more. It helps to have intuition, and it helps to be able to identify what you find it helps to be able to identify a good friend, and this can be extremely difficult because sometimes people can appear as really, really good friends at first, and then they can change their tune. The simple answer is disasters happen, friends can change their tune, people can change their minds. it's part of the human experience, and it sucks and it's hurtful. But one of the best things that you can do is to just try and remind yourself that everyone is going through this in some ways. And I think that the vast majority of people on this planet are worth trusting, but it's different for every person. Is it better to start now, or is it better to earn money first? Because I feel like money is very crucial. It depends on what you're making. If what you're making requires a budget, then yes, earning money in some other way tends to be the right idea. But what I would say is try not to get a really crushing, boring day job that you hate in order to fund something that you love, because you will be fucking exhausted if you ever reach the point where the creative thing you want to make isn't going in the way you want. You've spent tens of hours. You've spent 10, 11, 12 hours a day working at something that you hate, and then maybe you come home at the one thing that all of that work has been for, and if you don't enjoy it anymore, suddenly you don't enjoy anything. One thing that I would recommend is try to find a career or a low-level job of some kind in a career that you actually like. You know, if you want to be a writer, try and apply for a job to be a writer's assistant. You know, if you want to, or a copywriter, or an editor, or something like that. So, or just be a beta reader for someone and sort of say, hey, I'll review your work, learn to evaluate your critical thinking skills. Find creative ways of making money in a way that suits you. I mean, I don't think I should give advice on this subject because I was extremely lucky, and a lot of the projects that I'm funding at the moment are quite expensive, but that's because I was very successful and I worked really hard when I joined NIJISANJI. And to be fair to myself, I had been working really hard on other things before then for far less money, but I also ran into the problem where I found it difficult to be creative in my spare time because I didn't always enjoy the work that I was doing. So it's important to find work that makes you happy. I would say that's kind of, before anything else, make sure that it's not crushing you, because if it does, then, you know, it's going to make it a lot harder for yourself. It's difficult to find a job you love, but looking and looking and looking is better than just taking the first option that comes up. And thank you very much. Have you ever had an experience and wound up an idea and worked at it for a while, and you found someone had done it maybe better than you? How would you deal with it, physically and mentally? Difficult question. And the main thing I would like to say is that no one has done exactly what you've done. I mean, one of the big things, for example, that I often feel quite sort of bad about sometimes is stream thumbnails. Artists love to draw thumbnails for streams they're looking forward to. But there comes the difficult choice of which, if multiple artists have done something, which one do I use? That's an instance where someone's done something kind of the same as you have, and maybe I would pick one thumbnail over another. A video can only have one thumbnail. Yeah, that's just the nature of how it works. The fact is, just because one thumbnail was chosen over yours doesn't necessarily mean that yours was worse, even though they were both similar works of art made for the same purpose. Your style is different. Your approach is different. Maybe your composition is different. There's all sorts of things that are different. If you are writing a story that you feel like has a really similar plot to someone you've just met, I promise you, it only sounds that way on the surface. The depth of what you're writing and the relationships between the characters and the way that they interact, there is no way. I think it's a monkey on a typewriter situation where theoretically, eventually, two completely different people who don't know each other would sit down and write the exact same set of words. But otherwise, if there's even one letter different, if the characters are named differently, you've made your own thing. And that's just how it is. Accept that you've made your own thing and be content that, you know, you'll put it out into the world and it will be similar to someone else's work, but that's fine. There are no original ideas. Art always comes from somewhere. And undoubtedly, maybe you guys both just read the same book and wrote something inspired in a similar way by the same book. There's all sorts of stuff like that. I mean, let's take Lovecraft, for example. I mean, he wrote all sorts of things, and then you have like attempts at adapting his stories into film, Color Out of Space, Call of Cthulhu, and stuff like that. These are both inspired by the works of H.P. Lovecraft, but they're both fascinatingly different in their approach to telling this story. And your work is more different from the person that you think is the same than you think it is. So if you notice that someone else is making something similar, don't give up. Maybe cross-reference, if you trust them, read each other's work, and then maybe their work can inspire yours a little bit as well. And maybe you can think, you know what, I didn't do that. That's a good idea. And maybe they'll think the same thing. You'll never lose from reading someone else's work. You'll only ever learn. Q Glofun, thank you very much. How do you forgive yourself for neglecting creative work when you do have the time and means? ADHD person here, same. And I struggle with that too often. This is really heartbreaking, but what you need to remember is that what you have, and what I'm sure many other people watching have, is a special condition that makes it far more difficult to do certain things. It's not just that you're lazy, as people have probably told you. It's not just that you don't know what you're doing, as many people have probably told you. It's that there is a part of your brain that doesn't work in the same way as others. The thing about ADHD, the unique superpower, I suppose, as many people with ADHD talk about, is the fact that sometimes hyperfocusing can be a blessing. So what I would say, at least as my history, I was only diagnosed with ADHD last year, and I'm medicated for it now. But the truth is, medication doesn't fix you. It makes parts of the affliction easier. It makes it easier to get up and do your laundry, and it makes you finally understand what dopamine feels like. But you'll still be the same person underneath, and you'll still have task paralysis sometimes. You'll still have all sorts of different things go wrong. So don't trust it to be a magical solution. Don't trust it to be something that will change your life. What I would say, again, going back to earlier in the talk, listen to your heart, because as my history as someone with ADHD who did not know that he had ADHD for hundreds of years, is that when I did something creative, it would be something that I suddenly felt, I'm going to do this. When you feel a hyperfixation on something, follow it, because it's going to guide you in a really interesting direction. I'll tell you, my first 2 weeks especially on NIJISANJI were the result, well, really my first 6 months were the result of pure hyperfixation. I could not think about anything that was not doing this. And that's why I was streaming every day for 6 months, sometimes twice a day, because I was so hyperfixated. And as a result, I was really successful, more successful than I would have been if I had just taken it easy. And yes, there is some burnout here and there, and that's what people with ADHD have to deal with sometimes. Hyperfixation can be a blessing. So if you're struggling to do creative work, it's probably because that creative work is really not engaging you all that much. So feed your muse. Instead of thinking, right, I'm going to sit down in my computer chair and I'm going to write my first page of a thing. If you're stuck on the first page and you're like, oh God, I don't want to do this, chances are something you would write is not going to turn out to be very good. So stand up, take yourself to wherever it is you've got the ability to watch TV or to read a book, and feed your muse. And maybe you'll come across something that thinks, oh, I like that. Oh, I like that as well. I like that as well. And suddenly, click. The hyperfixation demon has found you, grabbed your head with his claws and says, go back to the computer and let's get to work. And if you're awake until the wee hours of the morning working on it, you've gotten something done. And to be honest, even though an unhealthy sleep schedule is bad for you, that's just what ADHD is like. So it's going to be fine. It's a difficult question, but I would say overall, just listen to your heart. Masato, thank you very much for the question. In case I've tried my best, even talked to your seniors, but still cannot make things good, should I give up and think of another idea? Really heartbreaking question, but a good one. Sometimes it is good to completely change course and go somewhere else. I would say it depends less on your own passion, and it depends less on, the objective, there's no objectivity in art, but the subjective quality of your work as deemed by someone supposedly senior to yourself, it depends more on your passion. If someone looks at what you've made, if you show them a work of art and they say, that is really bad, think about how that makes you feel. It should be quite upsetting, but if you think, well, sure, I guess it's not so great, I'm going to try something else, that's fine. If that's the idea that you have, go for it. If you think, no, I'm gonna try this again, and you want to stick at it and keep doing it because you believe in what you can make from it, keep at it. There's this idea that seniority means that you should always take someone's advice, but this isn't always true. People who come before you, we should respect the people who come before us. We should respect the people who've paved the way for us to be where we are. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're always right. Your own ideas and your values are extremely important. And just because someone who you view as superior to yourself says that's bad, doesn't necessarily make it true. No matter how high up in the hierarchy someone is, they're not perfect, and they will get things wrong, just like you will. Elvira Bayfield, if the topic I want to do is sadness that makes me accidentally immersed in the mood and the depressed mood makes me inefficient, may I have any suggestions from you? This is a really common thing for artists because a lot of the time art can be motivated by sadness. What I'm going to say to you is the fact that your process is your process. And when it comes to art, if it comes to a personal work of creativity that you're coming up with for your own reasons, efficiency doesn't matter, at least not until you get to the execution phase where other people are relying on you. If the only one relying on it is yourself, if you are depressed working on a depressing work of art and you need to take time, it probably just means that you're doing a really fucking good job. If writing a sad story makes you feel sad, the sad story is doing its job. If the fact that you already knew the plot of it, you already knew what to expect, and even still it's having an emotional impact on you, then you've made a good thing. So take your time and remember that if no one's relying on you, if you don't have a deadline and no one's expecting it from you, if the only person looking for it is yourself, then just trust your own process. Take your time to make it perfect. And if you break down in tears while writing this sad story, it probably means it's really fucking good. So trust what you've been doing so far and keep doing it. Dorothy, how can I make myself take a break from overworking and allow myself to enjoy media that I know I'd enjoy, but my brain says no breaks? This is really hard, and it's a learned thing. You can't just magically get rid of the brain worms that say do work, no breaks. I very much had this during my first 6 months in Luxiem, and I was a lot of you, if you were around at the time, you'll remember that I was very scared of taking 1 week off after I had been working solidly and taking no breaks for 6 months. I was extremely scared of taking that break because I thought I was going to lose my momentum and everything was going to go wrong. Since then, I took that break and I let myself unwind a little bit. And then after that, I took some more time off and I unwound a little bit more. And then I had my big month off in September of last year and I unwound a little bit more. And gradually over time, you will just learn that taking breaks is okay, especially if you're trying to do something creative, because taking time away from doing the thing means that you can think clearly about how to make that thing better. I mean, think about how much time it takes. I mean, that's the thing about Aaron Sorkin, right? 95% wandering around being depressed and then only 5% actually typing words. Just accept, you need to take some time to do it. It's a difficult thing to get inside your head, but you should accept at some point that, you will need time to yourself to feed your muse, to reevaluate your work, to critique your own work, and figure out what it is you're doing. Z, also, what can you advise for someone like me who is very interested in many fields of creative stuff, drawing and writing, etc., but can't find one to stick to because time and money is very limited, and what if I just waste it? Remember, there's a long life ahead of you, and you have lots of time to do all sorts of different things. Being multifaceted and having all sorts of different talents and interests is great. What I like to do is to, well, I mean, I don't really have too many things like that. I mean, I'll tell you a personal example for me. Two of my biggest passions are acting and filmmaking, right? And they sort of go together in a way. So with my movie project, or my law project that's going to come out soon, I am starring in it, and I'm the chief director and editor of that project. I'm finding a way of channeling my main interests into one thing and working on different elements of that one thing to create the final product. So let's say you're into drawing and writing, make a comic, make a graphic novel. If you're into drawing, writing, and acting, make a graphic novel and then voice it over. If you're into all sorts of other things, just take your time and remember that you don't need to make something immediately. You can make slow progress on things as long as you're doing something that you care about. And it's okay if, even with the slog of time and money and working a job and then coming home to do creative things, if you don't wind up doing something one night, that's fine. And if you don't feel the passion to keep doing it in your spare time, it's probably time to make a change. It's probably time to start on something new, or to change course and try doing something different. Cerelia. Last year, I became too anxious about writing. I felt my abilities were not keeping up with my ambition, so I tried to stop writing at all to rediscover my passion. How would you recommend dealing with overwhelming stress? I would say try not to stop what it is you love doing entirely. Taking a short break from it is good, but as Billy Crystal says in Throw Mama from the Train, a writer writes, always. And this isn't necessarily true. You don't need to be writing something down constantly. But the more that you do, the better that you will get. And the more that you allow yourself to do it, the better you will get. Breaks are important, and time to yourself is important. So I think that the important thing is finding balance. It's about having a dialogue with yourself and thinking, what do I need right now? If you are overwhelmed with stress, and if you cannot work, you need a break. If you don't take one now, eventually your body will take one for you, and it most likely will not be at a convenient time. Take a break. A week, a month, it doesn't matter. Just don't make yourself stop. If you stop and say, I'm giving this up, well, that's it. You've given up. And that's not the dialogue you should be having with yourself. Taking a break from something and saying, I need time to clear my head. I need a week in a different environment to think and clear my head. That's good, because that eventually will go back into what you've been doing before. Remember, you have a long life ahead of you. Think about taking a week break. It might seem like a long time when you're in a busy job and a busy industry, but then you think about how much time you have left in your life to do these kinds of things. There are 52 weeks in a year. I don't know what the life expectancy is like, as it differs from place to place. But I mean, what if you live to 80, 90? How many weeks is that? One of those off is not going to make the biggest difference in the world, especially if it means that you can use the rest of those weeks better, because you won't be so stressed and you'll be able to work a little bit better. So don't be afraid of taking time. Don't be afraid of taking a break. Just don't let yourself stop completely. Intend to return to things that you care about. And if you no longer care, whatever, find something you do care about. Cuddy Kane, how do you overcome the utilitarianism of the creative process? I often get depressed because I'm overly concerned about the response to my work, and because the response to my own work isn't at the level I'd expect. This is a problem for everybody. I think especially for artists, where it's like the sort of the Homer Simpson, like, oh, it's beautiful. Why doesn't mine look like that? It's a process, right? Sorry. It's a process. And every time that you draw something, you will get better. Having colossal expectations of yourself from the beginning is a surefire way to become depressed. And what I'm going to do is go back to my answer to the previous question and remind you that you have a long life ahead of you. There is a lot of time to get this right. And I think that something really important to remind yourself is that whatever you're doing, whether it's drawing, writing, directing, composing, anything like that, there is inherent value in your creativity. And the utilitarianism of what am I going to use it for, it can be unhealthy. And so, because what it does is it can kind of reduce the value of the raw creativity in a piece of work. And this is why, a little side tangent, it's so valuable to have filmmakers like Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino who can make whatever they want, because those films are raw creativity. They're in a very lucky position because they've been so successful that their name alone can sell a film to hundreds of millions of dollars. Not many people get that opportunity, but it's important to take in mind how raw creativity, without regards to utilitarianism. I mean, Christopher Nolan is being so creative with Oppenheimer, he didn't want to use CGI and is letting off real bombs in a safe environment, but still, he's so dedicated to something that he feels creatively passionate about that he's going the extra mile and is detonating real bombs to make his film feel more real. So try not to undervalue your creativity, and what I would say, try your best to make art that doesn't necessarily, from the beginning, you decide, this isn't for anybody. This isn't for selling. This isn't for advertising. This isn't for social media. This is for practice. This is for me. Whether it's event art, whether it's art, a drawing of a character you like, whether it's a story of something you've been thinking about, whether it's fan fiction, whether you want to draw a really detailed, smutty fan fiction about you getting railed by your fave, it doesn't matter what it is because it's for you. It's creative. And if you don't need to give it to someone, if there's no purpose for it, then you can kind of abandon that purpose and you can forget about the idea of needing to make it good. A really good interview I saw recently was with James Mangold, the director of a lot of films, including Logan, Ford v Ferrari, and most recently Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, who talked about how much he loved to direct films that were rated R, or 15 or higher. And what he basically said was, it gives the studio the go-ahead and the realization that they can't sell it to kids. And so they sort of start pulling out a lot of their controlling ways. These studios will stop saying, okay, you need to include this character so we can sell this action figure. We need to include this scene so that we can sell this Happy Meal. Oh no, we need to reduce that because it's not going to be able to get the rating we want and kids won't be able to see it, so we're going to make less money. So let's reduce the violence there. Let's do this, let's do that. If they accept from the beginning that the film will be rated R, they approach it more hands-off and they say, listen, just if you're going to do it, just do what you want. And from there, creativity really gets to shine. So to you, what I would really say is to give yourself time and space to make things that no one is going to see, because I think that you'll develop a lot more of your own confidence in that time. And maybe, if the utilitarianism is scaring you, by removing yourself from that utilitarianism, by removing yourself from the idea that you need to create something for a purpose, you might get some practice in, and then maybe eventually you'll be ready to embrace the fact that someone might want to pay you for your art. Ratboy Bart, how do you set boundaries with people who think your pursuit of creative activities in your own time is a waste of time? This is difficult. It depends on your proximity to these people. The worst and most common example I can imagine is if you still live with your parents. I don't, so I can do whatever I want, but many people do. If you live with parents who do not value your creative work, setting boundaries is important, but it's also important, I guess, if anyone here, is like sort of still living with their parents, like maybe you're sort of like 18, 19. I should hope no one under 18 is watching any of my streams, but regardless, it's important to remember while they do want what's best for you, they don't necessarily understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish because they may not have been in the creative industries before. And they come from a time when it really was incredibly difficult to get into that kind of thing. It was pure luck, a lot of talent, and also a lot of luck. And they think people who go into creative industries wind up unsuccessful, and I don't want that for my child. I'll tell you a story about what happened with me and my parents. A long time ago, I wanted to get into a creative job, and my parents wanted me to do a different kind of job. My dad had given me a job somewhere, and I was working for a little while, like in the service industry, and I was like, this is just not for me. I just can't stand doing this. My back hurts, and I'm forgetting everything, and I'm messing up the cash register and all that kind of stuff. But I started to submit my voice as an sort of an amateur voice actor, or as like a radio voice and stuff like that. And I started just sort of appearing in all sorts of different places. You know, that's why I made that joke on debut. Mind the gap between the train and the platform edge. And at first, you know, I had to kind of do it in secret. I didn't want to show my parents anything because they were like, you know, what the hell are you doing that for? You got a perfectly fine job already. And then it all changes when you bring home a paycheck. That is the instant that your parents will go, oh, okay then. Might not be the case for all parents, but at least that was the case with mine. Absolutely no belief that I could make something like this work. But the instant that I had money to show for it, that is the language they speak, and that's what they wanted to see. Not because that's the only language they speak really, but it's because they want me to be safe and secure and financially stable. And because what I was doing was capable of doing that, then they had trust in me. When it comes to setting boundaries outside of your parents, however, you have a lot more freedom with this. If you have friends who are bullying you for even choosing to spend time with your creative activities, I'm going to be honest, they're probably not very good friends. I said this to somebody earlier. You're probably hanging out with the wrong crowd. If, you know, I mean, my friends and I, for example, I was always creative when I was hanging out with my friends from my hometown, and they would like roast me, you know, in all sorts of interesting ways, which is just what friends do, especially in the UK. You know, lads just sort of taking the piss out of each other. There's that. But if someone's genuinely undermining you and making you feel like, listen, this is a waste of time and you should stop, the boundary you should set is saying, I'm out. Don't talk to me anymore. And then off you go, and you have more time and mental energy to work on the things that you actually want to work on. So with people like your parents, find some way of monetizing the work that you're doing to prove to them that it's a worthy use of your time, and then they may leave off a bit and give you some more freedom. If it's with friends and they make you feel creatively stifled and start telling you to shut the fuck up when you want to talk about something you care about, you're probably hanging out with the wrong group of friends. So it's difficult, but it may be time to seek different company, I would say. Tarushka, thank you very much for the question. How do you break through self-sabotaging, being curious about various topics but being unable to make yourself do actual research? It's stumping my growth, and the excuse of I'm too tired is getting a little old. I've been there. I don't have the energy. Coincidentally, a big one that people with ADHD have is called task paralysis, where you will just sit and do nothing. And you think, I need to do something, and you can't make yourself get up and do it. It feels like your body's just switched off and your brain is working, like sleep paralysis, right? But when it comes to self-sabotage, all it takes, I would say, is finding someone who can help. Reaching out to people. I mean, I know that if you're a member of this community, there are lots of Kindred who are really, really helpful and who may be better at this kind of thing than you are, or than I am probably. Doing research is difficult, but I would say, again, if you're curious about a topic, there must be something there that leads you want to, at the very least, go down the rabbit hole and start Googling something. And what you find on the internet may not necessarily be true, but it will give you an interest, and it will light that spark just a little bit to make you think, I wonder what else there is to find out. Maybe you've started with something and then you sort of need to know more about it. If that passion is there, and if you really do want to know it, sometimes all it takes is just kind of nutting up and being like, fuck, I have to do this. The easiest way of getting past this is finding a friend who can help motivate you or can help push you past that barrier of anxiety. I mean, I know a thing for a lot of people is making phone calls. Phone calls are terrifying for a lot of people. But a lot of the time, the biggest opportunities you'll ever come across, you'll secure by being on the fucking phone with somebody. It's a really depressing reality, but it's the truth. Finding someone who can encourage you to take phone calls, finding someone who can help you to get over the part of you that doesn't want to do this is the best way of setting yourself on a right path. Because I'm going to be so honest with you, once you've done it once, you'll get into such a string of positive habits. And then after just once, if you feel good about it, you'll be able to do it 1,000 times. It's like trying food that you didn't think you'd like. It was like when I tried sushi for the first time and I thought, oh. And then after that, I eat sushi any chance I get because it's delicious. Being able to, you'll get addicted to that sensation of doing a good thing. If you've done research and you find a piece of information that you've been looking for, that dopamine is going to hit, right? And suddenly you're going to think, fuck, oh, I did it. What am I going to do next? And then you're on the train and you're on the road to figuring out what to do next. And that is pretty cool. Nekosaka, thank you very much for the question. I always feel awkward reviewing my own work after it's been posted, and even start to be critical and look for flaws in it. Any good ideas about relieving that kind of feeling? What I'm going to tell you is not actually advice for how to relieve that feeling. What I'm going to tell you is is the fact that, hold on, I've had some sparkling water and it's turning me into a fucking bowl of gas. Jesus Christ. Anyway, going back to the world of filmmaking, one of the most successful filmmakers in the entire world and one of the most beloved in terms of his artistry is Martin Scorsese. And in the trailer, not even, you don't even have to buy it. In the first trailer for his masterclass, here it comes. God, I'm all bunged up. Anyway, in the trailer for his masterclass, the first thing that he says, listen, if you don't look at your first draft for a film, if you don't look at your first draft and feel physically ill, something's wrong. Looking at something you've made and feeling, sometimes if it's already out, if you look at something you're in the middle of working on and you don't feel the passion to continue it, changing course and trying something new is fine. Changing a scene, starting something new, whatever. If it's already out there and you finish the draft and you need to keep going with this, if you go, what that means is you care about it. And what that means is your standards for it are high. It's a good thing to feel awkward about reviewing your own work because it means that you're analytical. It means that you're looking at what you've made and you think, how can I make it better? Also, it means that you're growing. And something really interesting about that whole process is, what the fuck was I going to say? Oh, I had a really good point and I lost it. Anyway, yes. I've lost it, whatever. That's lost media to the ends of time. By giving your work to other people, you are opening yourself up to criticism. And this can be really painful sometimes if you're not expecting to receive negative criticism. It's like I said earlier, being able to find the value in what people tell you and being able to, if someone can say, hey, I love this, but I would change this, they're not, if you've asked them for criticism, that's just what they feel. They're not being rude and they're not saying that you are a bad artist or that you've made bad work. They're just giving you a way of improving it. And if you look at something you've made and you think, oof, that probably means that you've identified a way of making it better. And that means that that second draft is going to be miles better than that first draft. And even better, if you look at that second draft and you go, oof, you've already found something else to improve that. Keep looking at your work, keep reviewing it, just have it in a state where you think it's finished, show it to people and read it yourself. And if you look at it and you think, fuck, that sucks, you've found how, you've already got it. If you've read something and thought, ugh, you've found a way of making it better already. You already know what you need to do. Because how would you have cringed at something if you hadn't, if you didn't know what the problem was? If you didn't think there was a problem, you would love every word of it, right? Hi, Ran. So that's what I would say to you. Don't, relieving that kind of feeling, the best way of relieving it if it's making you truly upset is to take a fucking break. Take a step back, engage in something different, play a game, do something comfortable for a little while, but you need to be prepared to come back to it. And you need to be prepared for the fact that that feeling will always be there. But if it is, I'm here to tell you that's a good thing. That is a good thing, and it will help you make your art better. So embrace it. Embrace the feeling of disgust you have for the first draft because it will make that second draft so much better. If you don't know how to improve it, well, think about the things that you don't like about it. If you've drawn a picture and you think, oh God, something about it is, if you literally can't summon the words for what the fuck is wrong with it, right? If you literally have no idea, that's when asking friends comes in. You know, if you can't figure it out, like, listen, I don't think this is right. Ask a friend, and they'll say, well, there's this, there's that, there's that. If you're unlucky and maybe you don't have the biggest social circle, maybe you're quite shy, there are all sorts of communities online where you can find people to review your work. There's like, forums. If you want to publish something on AO3, don't do it right now. I've heard the website's weird, but there are comments from people that you can take in. If you think something's good and someone criticizes it, sometimes they're just being mean, but sometimes they might have a point, and you can look at that and be like, maybe you're right. And then you can go from there. You may not have friends, but you'll be able to find opinions on your work. If you look hard enough, you'll be able to find it. So look to yourself. If you feel discomfort with what you've made, figure out what it was about it that made you uncomfortable. Change it, correct it, make it better. If it still does, keep working at it, and eventually, you probably won't feel that way anymore. And then you'll know it's ready. If you have no fucking idea in the world, try and ask somebody else, whether they're a friend, a family member, or they're someone you've met online through a forum, or, this is a really wonderful community. You could join a Kindred Discord, and I'm sure that after this stream, a lot of them are going to be really keen on helping people out. So that's a good place to start. Deirdre's videos, thank you for the question. Does one need to stay with trends to be famous creatively, or can they do something brand new every time? Like drawing things from movies and anime we love, writing books or fiction based off other works? This answer, need to stay? No, absolutely not. You don't need to stay with trends because new trends are emerging all the time, and trends are created by trendsetters. If you want to follow a trend, sure, if you see a rising trend and you want to jump on those coattails, that's good. I mean, look at me. I didn't start VTubing. I didn't invent it, but I'm very successful as a result of those who came before me and laid this path and created this trend in this niche. And I'm extremely thankful for it. But some of the things that I am doing within VTubing are very unique. There are some things coming up that are unlike something you might expect, and that is something brand new. The answer, I would say, again, it goes back to the very beginning. Listen to your heart. If you're inspired to adapt something, if you're inspired to make a work of art based on something else, as long as you've got copyright permission to do so, then do that. You want to draw fan art, do that. But if you're feeling the compulsion to do something original, do it. If you're being guided by that voice in your head or that feeling in your chest to go in a certain direction, to go and do work on something that's trendy or work on something that's all yours, just follow your heart in a given moment and you'll find yourself in the right place. At least that's what I think. Kendra, thank you very much. Is it normal to have doubts about your own works of art? Yes, 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 yes. 100%, 1,000,000%. If you made a work of art and had no doubts whatsoever about a single part of it, I would be absolutely amazed, and it also it probably wouldn't be very good. Art is an iterative process, and sometimes you get blessed by God and you just create something fantastic from square one. Even those things have room for doubt. Even those things have flaws. There are films that I would consider fantastic, but they're still flawed. There are still things wrong with them. If you feel discomfort with something that you've made, if you have doubts, don't be like, oh, that makes me sad. I mean, if it makes you sad, that's good, but don't kind of shy away and give up on the work of art you've made. Really think, what triggered that feeling of doubt? What made you feel when you read that thing that you wrote, or if you looked at that piece of art you drew, what is it about this that makes me doubt it? So now that you've thought about it, if you figured it out, then you can change it. And that means that you, before having doubts, have gone from making a subpar work of art to something that might be really, really great. I feel like my own art is really not good. Perhaps you will feel that way. And remember that the more that you draw, the more that you iterate upon it, and the more that you improve upon it, the more that you draw new things, you will get better and better and better with time. That's just how this works. Practice makes perfect, always. So if you have doubts, iterate on the work that is giving you doubts, and if you don't have any doubts, make a new one. If you have doubts so bad that you can't stand to look at that same work of art, start a new one and begin again. Because remember, for every artist with 200 whips they've never posted is an artist with 200 pieces of art worth of brand new knowledge and experience that they can then draw from in the future. Chun, I've been finding it difficult to reach a consensus with my teammates. We have a lot of disagreements and I'm struggling to solve them. I don't know how to handle it. This sometimes will happen. Sometimes you can have, oh my God, it's happening again. Oh Jesus, I hate this. Anyway, I'm so gassy today. Anyway, no, I'm fuck. Okay, no, I'm good. Listen, sometimes a team is not meant to be. And sometimes two people can have such a wildly different vision for a project because taste differs so much that you may be better fit for a different team. It depends on whether you're leading the team or not. If you're the leader of a creative team, and if you feel like you're evaluating, if you're not shutting up your teammates and you're not shutting them down, but you're actually listening to what they say and you've evaluated it and you genuinely think, no, I'd really rather do what we were doing originally, but you've maybe listened to them on some other things. If there's someone on your team who's constantly trying to go against the grain, who always wants to turn it into their own thing, and is like, no, not your way, my way, not your way, my way, then they're not a team player. You're not the problem. They are. This isn't always true. Maybe you are the problem. It's okay to admit that you might be, because sometimes we are. Sometimes if, everyone else wants to do one thing and you're causing a problem because you don't want to do it, sometimes admitting to just, I guess it's going to be that way, is a part of being part of a team. And it can be really painful sometimes when you have a strong vision for something, but then it goes in a different direction. That's just a part of when art becomes commercialized, and it's a part of when you work as a team. Your team's voice matters just as much as yours. And, if there are a team of four people and 3 people want to do one thing and you want to do something else, you may just need to accept that, it needs to go a different way. If you're at a point where it feels like all creativity has come to a complete standstill and you cannot agree on a single thing, it might be time to find a new team. It's just how it happens. Some creative projects are ill-fated and will never be finished, and that's happened to me, and it will, if you're in this industry for very long, it will most likely happen to you too. Poison Abbey, thank you very much. No, it's okay. Iris Parakos, thank you very much. Is it better having many fans but not following you for the art you made that you actually care about, or having no fans at all? This is a difficult one because sometimes what we can do, this is the case for every single person on YouTube ever. Apart from a very select few extremely lucky individuals at the very top, we need to do a specific type of thing that our audience likes us for. I like doing ASMR, but if I could get away with playing video games, playing Dark Souls every day for my entire career, you bet your ass I would do that. But there is always, when it comes to publishing art and when it comes to giving it to other people and trying to, most importantly, sell it, you need to make sure that the people who are following you are getting something that they have been paying or following for. You don't necessarily need to do this. You can draw whatever the fuck it is you want to draw. You can draw your OCs every single day for the rest of time, and no one will ever stop you from doing that. I certainly wouldn't. But you should accept that people, the world at large, people out in the world are looking for things that they care about, and they're looking for things that they already have an interest in. People need to be brought into something in some way, and they can't just gain a magic interest in something that you like out of nowhere. They might, but it's going to be very difficult compared to finding it through a fandom. So at the end of the day, it is all up to you. My advice would be to find yourself within a fandom and nestle yourself in and grow based on the fan art or the fan fiction that you draw. Put yourself around people who are going to find your work easier, and then if it's good enough, you might build a following of people who might actually be interested in your original work. Now, this is really, really unique, and I've seen experiences where someone will average 1 million views a video on something their fans want, but they try to do something completely original that only they want. maybe 5% of the viewership will travel over. That's just a reality of how this industry works. But it's worth it. If you've spent your life, doing work for a fandom, and you've spent your life working within a niche, it's probably going to give you more attention on your own work than you would otherwise. 50,000 views compared to 1 million is still better than 50,000 views. It's still better than, getting 0 views whatsoever. But also remember that the quality of art is not determined by how many people see it. Genius works of art bomb, terrible works of art make billions of dollars. That is the world we live in. And what matters most of all is that you're happy with what you're creating. If you publish something on Twitter and it gets 0 likes, but you look at it and you think that's the best fucking thing I've ever drawn, and that makes you happy, good. If you go on Twitter and you publish something to a fandom and it gets 50,000 likes, and you also think that's the best thing I've ever fucking drawn in my life, same thing. If you're happy, you're happy. So go with the process that you trust the most. And really just curate your online experience and try to avoid the unfortunate, issue of comparing yourself to others. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the time it's not about talent, a lot of the time it's about choices. And, joining a fandom and rising up within it tends to be a lot easier to break into than just being purely original. But does that make their art any better than yours? Does it mean that when you draw your work that your art won't improve? No, your art will improve at the exact same rate that theirs does if you're drawing the same amount. And so by the end of it, when it comes to getting a job and publishing original works, you will have learned so much from drawing. A bit of so much luck is involved, of course, but it's difficult to think about luck because, the more time you spend online, the more time you spend putting yourself around people, the more time that you spend, putting yourself out there, the better your luck will be. They say in the creative industries that you need to create your own luck, and it is true. You can't just say, oh, I'm not successful because I'm not lucky. Because your big break, getting noticed for something, it could be right around the corner. And if you never publish anything, well, yeah, your luck is going to be atrocious because what is there to discover if you never put anything out there? So yes, it's a difficult thing to decide on. If you want to make original work that's only valuable to you, that's brilliant. But you have to be prepared for the fact that people who ride trends and do stuff with a fandom tend to have an easier time sort of getting their big start. So I would say it's a good chance to get yourself out there and then to sort of make the switch to doing something original later on. I was going to read one and then I clicked off of it and it faded away. That sucks. Okay. Hold on, I can probably get that back. I wanted to read that question. Hold on. They have a cool new feature on YouTube Chat where I can filter it by super chats purely, which is cool. Okay, we have one from Gooey Flames. How do I stop being such a perfectionist with my work? The rat race with trying to get a creative job made me feel like everything I draw needs to be professional, so I never draw for fun anymore. This is really difficult because I also struggle with being a perfectionist. It has its ups and downs. Being a perfectionist means that when you do wind up publishing your work, it will probably be pretty damn good. But the less that you do, the less you'll learn. It's a really difficult thing to get past because the biggest thing at risk when you create something that's not perfect is your own ego. And ego is a dirty word, and we don't like to mention that we have an ego. But everyone, I don't care who you are, I don't care how selfless or fantastic you think you are, you have an ego. You have some sense of self-understanding, and you have the ability to reflect and look at yourself in the mirror and feel, am I happy with myself or am I sad? This comes with the death of one's own ego, and I feel that it is more a problem for just beginning in the creative spaces than it is for having a long career there. Because if you have a career, you need to learn that not everything you make is going to be perfect. It's tragic and it's really difficult to learn. But I mean, if you sit behind, while you've been sat, being a perfectionist and you've sat afraid to ever release something that you've made, there's been someone else who's been okay releasing something that has a few flaws, and God, they've managed to put out like 10 times as much as what you might have. And it might not be as good as what you're doing, but the more that they do, even if it's not as good, the more they learn. It's a really difficult lesson to learn, but art is about the exposing and the destruction and then the rebirth of your ego. You need to be comfortable with unhappiness. Art is by nature painful in many ways. If you sit there and you look at your work and you think, God, it's not perfect, maybe you'll never publish it. And this is a tragedy, right? However, if you look at it and you think it's not perfect, you will feel that, oh, it's not perfect. Because being a perfectionist is fine. The quality that you demand is a good thing. Having high standards is a good thing. But it's not a good thing if it stops you from doing the things that you want to do. If you're talking about drawing for fun, what I would say is use this as the space. Use this as your playground to put a knife through the heart of your ego and watch as it tries to come back to life. Because it will hurt to put your fun drawings that aren't perfect out in the world. It will inevitably hurt. But the learned ability to be okay with releasing something that has flaws is something that will follow you for the rest of your career, and you will love yourself for being able to be okay with what you make, no matter what it is. Hold yourself to those high standards. Try to make it the best that you can possibly make it. I don't want to ever see you, say, well, all right, it's fine to make it bad. No, make it as good as you can make it, but nothing is perfect. Every single film, every work of art has one brushstroke that's gone off course that maybe you don't like. Or maybe it's based on something that over time has grown to be somewhat problematic with our heightened sense of awareness, right? Perhaps there's a script that has a word that could have been made better but is otherwise great. 100% perfect works of art don't exist. They just don't. Exactly. What if maybe you don't like the doodles you're doing? Maybe you don't like what you're putting out, but someone else might fucking love them. Me personally, I find the doodles that people put online, I find them fucking hilarious. And I love looking at those alongside art that's incredibly professional and detailed. Art is just art, and I think that it's a shame because there is within drawing, art, there's sort of this perception of objective professional quality. But when we think about creativity and we think about art, there really is zero correlation, because art is not about how brilliantly it's been composed. It's a huge part of what makes some art beautiful, but it's the intention. It's what you made it for, and it's what you want people to get out of it, and it's what you get out of it. If anyone in the audience has a kid, the drawing they did of a horsey that you put up on the fridge, that's art, and it's valuable, and it's great, because they drew it and were proud of it, and they thought you would like to see it. That is also art. Same thing as your doodles. Same thing as what you do that's professional. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how it looks. The more you make of it, the better you'll get. And what matters about it is your intention. If you put a dumb doodle online and it makes someone chuckle, it served its purpose and you made a good work of art. End of story. And yeah, it's a difficult thing, but you must accept that you are not immune to criticism, and you will create bad things sometimes. You'll create things you're not proud of, but you will never grow, and you'll never learn quite as much as you could if you just brave the music and you show someone. And maybe, just maybe, this work that you look at and you think, fuck, I hate it. They might look at it and think, oh my God, that's brilliant. And then maybe you look at it in a different light. And maybe you feel okay to put it out there, and then you've learned what was wrong with it from your own perspective, but you've still managed to grow and keep going on this path that you're on. Remember what I said. Learn how to kill and resurrect your own ego enough times until it's okay with creating something that's not exactly perfect, because there's nothing that's perfect. A perfect work of art would be completely profound and shocking and fantastic to everyone all at once, but everyone has different tastes, so it's impossible, and you just have to learn that and accept it. How to network without feeling imposter syndrome or clout chasing with a larger creator. This is a big, big thing in this industry. The fear of, I don't want to be a clout chaser, is scary because the word is thrown around all the time. The idea of, oh, if you try to contact someone who is in a higher up position than you are for a collab, that you're clout chasing. This is a really silly and harmful idea that is anti-progress. We are, by creating an environment that is so against people's growth and people climbing the ladder, we're creating an environment that stops people from achieving their dreams, including people like you. Networking and speaking with people who are in a higher up position than you is part of life, especially a part of work. And if anyone, if you work in the printer room at an office, you work in the mail room, and then one of your friends winds up in an elevator with the boss and then kind of makes an elevator pitch for something, and then by the time they've walked out of it, they've connected, and suddenly the guy walks away with a promotion. That's not clout chasing. He just knew what he was doing and managed to get on the next path of his career. If you guys are friends, now here's the difference, I feel. If you're friends and you're close with this person, and the instant he leaves the mailroom, he stops talking to you, I think that is the definition of a bit of a social climber or a clout chaser, because their relation, they might have fostered a friendship with you in order to get something, and then when they didn't need it, they got rid of it. I think that's the definition we should really be thinking about. If someone is, and also, by the fucking way, on the subject, being friends with someone doesn't mean talking to them 24/7. If someone's career blows up and yours doesn't, and they don't talk to you quite as much, maybe you're the one who has to message them first a few times, that doesn't mean they've forgotten about you. I'm sorry, but if you're getting in your friends' like hair and saying, hey, why aren't you talking to me as much as you used to when you became successful, you're being the toxic friend, not them. They found success, and to be honest, they're probably busy. And that's just how this works. For me, for example, when I got successful with NIJISANJI, I had a lot of friends at the time who I was talking with a lot, and now I still talk to them, but not quite as much. Do you want to know why? It's not because I left them behind or because I don't think I can get anything from them. It's because before I joined Niji, I did not have a fucking job. I was bored shitless, stuck at home every day, trying to figure out what to do for my assignments. I had plenty of time to talk to my friends. I still love them, and if I get time to hang out with them, I do. But because I'm more successful with my career, and because, I don't work in the same circles that I used to, does that make me a clout chaser? No. I found success because I put myself out there. The best thing that I will say about this is if you've just found success in an honest way, if you've networked, and if you've, that's just, networking is not clout chasing. If you send someone an email who's like a creator with like 1 million more subscribers than you, if they want to collab with you, it's probably not because they can get something out of you. It's probably because they think like, hey, I like their style. Let's do something. Maybe they want to be friends. Maybe they want to do that. It's all possible. It's completely possible. Does that make you a clout chaser? No. You looked up to someone and you wanted to work with them, and if they said yes, it means you did the right thing. If you forget about your friends and you start chatting shit about them after you've left, then that is a little bit of a social climber thing to do. But, if you're not actively engaging with shitty toxic behavior, if you're not unfollowing someone on Twitter the instant you pass them in followers, like you've been keeping an eye on it, you're probably fine. I don't think it's worth fretting about too much. The best thing that you can do is to just, do your thing, do your job, and do it well. Don't worry about what people in your position or in people in previous positions to you might think about it, because if you're being an honest, good person, if you're taking care of yourself, if you're spend maybe not the most time in the world. I mean, all of my friends have jobs now, and we get to meet up, when we schedule a time to go out for drinks, it tends to be once every 2 or 3 months, because we understand everyone has a fucking job. We're busy and we can't constantly be talking to each other, but when we do, we make time, we see each other because we want to, because we're friends. And that is just that. Do your job and do it in a way that makes you happy. If you grow fast, because you've made a connection with someone who's in a better position than you are, You are not a clout chaser or a social climber. You're just good at networking. And that is a part of this industry, and we have to accept that. End of story. Kendra, thank you for the Arca Super and for the question. Also want to know if it's okay to want others outside your own family to like your art. Of course it is, because at times I feel like they say my art is good because they have to say it because they're my family and don't want to hurt me. Now this is a big worry that a lot of people have. Are my friends, are my family, are they being honest with me when I show them something I've made? Big part of that is trust. And when it comes to friends, and when it comes to the people in your life that you really value and that you really trust, the easiest way that you can do this, it doesn't make them a bad friend if the first time you show them art and ask for feedback and they say, oh, it's great. That doesn't make them a bad friend if they might not be telling the full truth, because at the end of the day, they want you to be happy with something you've made. You need to approach the situation in a way that makes sure that they're aware that you want to be criticized. If you come up to them with a painting and you say, hey, I'm asking you seriously, what do you think about this? And they look at it as like, don't be afraid to be mean. Just make sure you cover your bases. Say, don't be afraid to be mean. Don't be afraid to tell me it's bad or something else. Just, what do you think of this? And if then they still say, oh, no, it's great, but you've shown them a picture of a stick figure, then maybe you realize that that might not be the best person to get criticism for your art from. But yes, wanting people outside your family to like your art is, that's just like something everyone who's creative feels. I mean, if you only made art for your family, I mean, it's a nice idea to, draw pictures for your family all the time. But don't you want more than that? I mean, I'm happy for you if that's all it is. But it's, everybody wants more people to like what they make. I think a huge part of creativity is wondering, what will other people think when I show it to them? Will people like what I make? Because art does inherently come from one's heart. It comes from one's ego. And we, inherently, we want our ego to be blown up. We want to feel good about ourselves. And that's why we share it. We share it because we want to be successful. We want a job. And also because when we create something that's personal and someone says, that's really good, it feels good. End of story. You're not wrong for having an ego. And you're not wrong for wanting to be complimented for something that's good. But be prepared that when you ask people for criticism on something, that they may just shatter your ego, and you've got to be prepared to pick up those pieces, put it back together so that it's going to be ready to be inflated again when inevitably you've improved and someone says, actually, that's really good. Then you've learned and you've grown and you'll be ready for something else in the future. It's a long, arduous process, but if you keep trying, you will get there. Let me have a look at some more of these. I didn't think I was going to do questions for this long, but I'm getting really sucked into this. How to avoid falling back into work that's familiar and popular but unsatisfying. I'm not yet where I want to be in this new discipline and feeling a little lost. Thanks, Chris. It's a difficult question because what we have to consider is the impact of capitalism and the impact of, the commercialization of our work. You could, if you could sit in your room and draw 1 million personal projects as many times as you wanted. But unfortunately, the problem comes when you need to put bread on the table. And then suddenly there comes the issue of, oh, I need to do something that people will want to buy now. We kind of ran into this earlier where I think that trying to find, really looking for a good work-life balance is very important. Finding a job outside of your passions that you really genuinely enjoy as well. Maybe it's something to do with your passions. Maybe it's something different that you also happen to enjoy. The biggest way, I think, of making sure that you have the energy to keep engaging in work that is purely personal once you get home is making sure that you're not doing a job that is fucking exhausting. Because if I do one thing during the day, I mean, it's an ADHD thing, but I think it applies to everyone else as well. If I do one thing during the day that I don't enjoy doing, I don't want to do anything else for the rest of the day, period. I don't want to spend any time working on something for me because I'm overwhelmed and I'm tired and I'm stressed and I just lie in bed and I watch YouTube for hours. That's just how it goes. If you put yourself in a position where the job you're working makes you happy, and if you like, it just depends on what you're doing. I can't speak for you and what you enjoy doing, but working a really shitty dead-end job it sucks. And a lot of the time you might have responsibilities that mean you can't just randomly quit out of nowhere. And of course you can't, it's difficult to just go out of your way to find a better job. But when you are going out of your way to find a better job, know your worth. You know, you are more valuable than you think you are. And a big part of getting a better job is not necessarily having better experience or qualifications. Sometimes it's just about being really, really good in an interview and forming a connection with the person who's interviewing you. Sometimes if you just look, maybe for a while, if you're finding it incredibly hard to, find time to draw things that you really want to draw, or making art that you really want to make, instead of doing that, take a little bit of time to spend that time you would be spending on looking for a job that you really want to work. Because if you really want to work a job, it'll take away the stress of a shitty dead-end job that you don't like. And it'll take away the stress of needing to make money through your passions in a way that you don't like. And hopefully, you'll be left with time and space and energy at the end of every day to sit down and really work on what it is that you truly want to do, which in your case is artwork. So it's a difficult process, but that would be what I would say, is to try and just curate your environment, no matter how long it takes, to put yourself in a better position to make your artwork work. You should try, because just stopping and doing nothing is, you haven't failed, but you're on your way. So just be making your way towards something at all times, no matter how little progress you make every day. Just chipping away at something, just a tiny little bit every day, looking at one website for a job offering, trying to just do a sketch, just the tiniest little thing every day. That is enough. And one day, all of that will add up and you might be in a better position. And I'm sure that by that time, you probably will have been able to practice quite a bit, and then maybe you'll be in an even better position than you were before. Shoes wife, thank you very much for the question. I'm already at the part of my creative journey where I get paid to do what I do. However, it is at this moment where I have a hard time being creative. Any advice on how to get over this? Yeah, see, this is the problem, because when you're commissioned for something, I've done commission work before. I've done work where it's like I get commissioned to do something, and then I also in my spare time would do work that I like to do. Like I mentioned, I like to make sort of storytelling stuff and write stories and voice them over in my spare time. That was what I had passion for. When it came to commissions, there was some that I felt so creatively uninvested in that I literally just turned to the commissioner and I said, I can't do this. Like I literally just took the job on, tried for a week, and just said, it's not happening. Doing work that isn't personal can be really, really crushing. And I think that at a certain point, this is a point where I feel like I sort of skipped over this part in my journey because I was so lucky. And so I don't really feel too qualified to give advice on how to process this kind of thing. But I think that in my own situation, what it takes really is examining what it is about your work that is stifling your creativity. So I'll think about, because I can't relate to what it must feel like to actively work on commissions as a means of making money, I'll think about my own journey. So sort of in relation to that. So for me, I began doing everything that I felt like I should be doing. And I did really genuinely enjoy it. Stream as much as possible every single day. Don't have any boundaries. Give your fans everything they want. Push for this, push for that. Do collabs. Stream in the morning, stream in the evening. Join collabs at night. Stay up all night. Wake up in the middle of the day. Everything like that. And it worked for me for a while. But eventually, not only did it make me stressed, but it also, started to wear away at my creativity. And there were some weeks where after my first 6 months or so where I would look and I would think, what do I want to do this week? And I couldn't think, what on earth am I supposed to fill up this week with? But I felt like I needed to do something. And so I just started putting in random shit that I didn't necessarily want to do. And I think there was a certain time period where people would watch my streams and feel like, he doesn't seem like he's really having too much fun. And the answer is because I kind of wasn't. Now I feel better because I've taken a step back and realized, okay, I can take more time for doing things that I enjoy. And this is another way of doing work. So what I would say is to think about your own situation. You know it better than I do. think about what it is that you're able to do and what it is that's really stopping you from feeling creative, and think of a way that you can create a better balance. Finding time and space to do work that you do feel creatively motivated by is incredibly important, because also, if you care more about the work you're doing, you'll be more inclined to improve at it. You'll be more inclined to make it better. And if it's better, you'll be working harder for it, and you will grow and learn as an artist faster. So it's difficult and it's vague. For me, I had the luxury of taking a step back because I've been very lucky and I can kind of afford to do that. So again, it's difficult to give advice when I feel, so fortunate, and I don't want to kind of make it seem like, oh, it's so easy, just do what I did. But there will be ways. There will be ways within your life and within your experience that you can think about the work that you're doing, and you'll think, okay, let's take commissions, for example. Instead of taking on 10 commissions per week, ballpark estimate, if you're really fast at drawing, 10 commissions a week, why not double your prices and do 5? You'll probably at the end of the day have far more time, and the work you make will probably be much better, and you'll put a lot more of yourself into it. Sometimes being stretched thin, being stretched between things can make you less creative. Like me when I tried to do multiple streams a day, every day for an entire month. Eventually, you'll just be doing them for the sake of doing them without really knowing why. You need to wake up and do this work for a reason. So if commissions are your job, there's a really good story about this. There was a beach store in the UK where it was owned by a mother-son duo. The mother was the owner and the son worked there. And the mum said, I'm going on a retreat and I need you to hold down the fort and manage the store. And as she was leaving, she said, I need you to put these seashells in the door down to half price because they're not selling very well. Somehow he misunderstood the instructions. He did not understand the assignment and he doubled the price instead. And you know what happened? Those seashells sold out before she even got back. What they were struggling to sell before had immediately sold out because the higher value meant that people wanted them more. If you value your own work, and if you think about your weekly budget, right? What do I want to spend money on? What do I need to spend money on? How much do my groceries cost? How much does my how much do the things that I enjoy cost? How much, my Netflix subscription, whatever it is that you wind up paying for, water, gas, electricity, internet, everything. How much money do you need for that? And how much of that comes from your job where you're paid to do art? Instead of stretching yourself thin with thousands of different projects that you feel like you can't put all of your time into, understand your value and raise your prices. And people will believe, shit, that is some art that for my project I think I should get. So it's not applicable to every situation, but please, yeah, exactly. The concept of scarcity. The more that people feel like, have limited slots for your commission as well. If someone wants to commission you, make them, have 5 slots for the foreseeable future. Get them while they're hot. And someone who wants a commission will be like, oh shit, I better get that now. We're going into business philosophy right now, and this is not something I'm terribly familiar on, but these are all pretty basic concepts. So yeah, like I was saying, find a way of changing the way that you're working in a way that makes you happier. If you're overworked and if you're doing lots and lots of work for not much money, charge more and understand how much more valuable your art is. You will care more about the work that you do, and you will have more time to work on things that you care about after the fact. At least that's how it should be. My stummy's going. I gotta get some food, but I'm gonna keep reading these questions. I'll have food after. Everyone always says, so from Lollipop, everyone always says it's important to be yourself, but being yourself doesn't take into account other people's feelings. Someone says I'm selfish. How should I choose between being myself and not hurting others? Well, it's not really about creativity, but I guess this can kind of apply because creativity is about individuality. So I guess I'll field this one. Being yourself is really important. Being yourself is how you get in touch with what it is that you really want from life. And if you spend your whole life pretending to be someone you're not, you'll inevitably fall in with a crowd of people you don't like, doing a job you hate, and you'll be really depressed. So be yourself. Listen to what it is you want to do, and then really seriously consider doing it. And you'll probably be a lot more happy. The thing is, being yourself does not mean that you get to be an asshole. And I think that that's sort of part of this question is like, don't take into account other people's feelings. You can absolutely do both. Don't get me wrong. You can absolutely do both. You can be considerate of others, and you can consider other people's feelings while being yourself. Now, it depends on what these feelings are. What you might be alluding to is the idea of, perhaps we're talking about parents, right? Perhaps we're talking about my parents don't want me to be an artist because they feel that I will be a starving artist and I'll be unhappy and I'll die without anyone recognizing what I did. I won't meet a high value partner and I won't have kids and I won't continue the family and all that. And that's what they feel. Sometimes choosing to be yourself means going against the feelings of others. And this is inevitable. And that's a good example of it, right? Sometimes you need to look at if your family are cramping down in your dream, but you know in your head, it's like, this is what I want to do with my life. And if I don't do this, I'm going to be so depressed. Sometimes you will wind up being estranged, and sometimes you will wind up without support from your family. That's just a choice that you have to make. Do you love your family enough to put up with the expectations they have of you? Do you love them enough to try and change their point of view? Or do you know that you'll never be able to appease them, and so you think, fuck it, I'm moving out and I'm going to make it on my own? Difficult, extremely risky, but possible. But of course, because this question was kind of vaguely worded, the other thing, care about other people's feelings. Being yourself doesn't mean that if you see someone on the street and in your head you get the intrusive thought that you think they look ugly, it doesn't mean that you should go up and say, hey, you're fucking ugly. Cartoonish example, but be yourself to the point where you're accessing the most positive things that you have always wanted to do, not to the point where you become an asshole, because you should always consider the feelings of others. In any profession or situation that you're in, you should always be considerate of others' feelings. If you're about to hurt someone's feelings for a reason that you think is good, like what I mentioned with the parent situation, think about it beforehand. And think about the fact, think about what you're doing and why, sometimes hurting someone's feelings can be the right thing to do. If you want to break up with somebody, it's heartbreaking, traumatizing for some people, but no more traumatizing than being trapped in a relationship that you're desperate to leave and are unhappy in. It's one of those really sad parts of life, that there's no way that for some relationships, there is no perfect happy ending. If you feel like you're stuck in a rut and in a dead end, sometimes you just need to get on a different path. And, if you need to break someone's heart to do that and just say, listen, I'm not interested anymore, then that's that. So hurting people's feelings with reason and with the right sort of, moral aptitude for it. If you think, if I say this thing to this person, they'll be upset, but we'll both be in a better position, sure. If you're saying, I want to be myself so that I can just be an asshole to people, don't do that, because you're not going to have very many friends and you're going to be lonely and it's going to suck. That's my answer to that question. Sunny, someone had stolen one part of my work, and I only realized that later. I was not only angry, also with my new colleagues now, I feel holding back ideas and honesty. I feel bad. Should I change myself or should I keep feeling what I feel? Yeah, having your work stolen is a big thing. A big thing. If this is a person you care about tremendously, if this is a person who you're close to, confront them and say, why the fuck did you do that? Why did you steal this part of my work? It's like, well, remember, if they took inspiration from something you did, it can be hurtful if it felt like they're sort of taking a leap off of you, and trying to sort of screw you over. But maybe they're just writing a story that has some similarities. Maybe they're drawing a piece of art that's a little similar. Sometimes, they didn't mean anything by it and they think, oh yeah, I just loved what you did and, I tried to do it in my way. That's art and you have to be prepared for that. If they passed it off of their own, or if they copied and pasted part of it, that's different. If this is someone you care about, like I was saying, if this is someone that you love and want to be close to, confront them and ask them why the fuck they did that. If they're unwilling to back down, and if this keeps happening, cut them out of your life. You have the right as a person to do that. Same as we were talking about before. It will hurt their feelings, but if for you it's the right thing to do, and if it's what's going to make you happy in the long term, even if it's scary, you have the right to do that. And moving on from that, it will feel scary. But we had this question before. If I'm scared of trusting people, what do I do? The answer is to slowly open up to people, show them little bits, sketches or first chapters until you feel like you really can trust them, and then choose to open up more with whatever you feel comfortable with. Don't do more than you're comfortable with. And also, if you can, therapy is really cool. Oh, Yubo, really, I thank you for the super. I'm glad you passed your exam. I think we're kind of reaching the end of the questions for now. Cool. All right. Oh, there's one more up here that I think I missed. As someone who wants to create a graphic novel, I face issues with artist block or writer's block. This makes me go on depressive episodes as I literally can't do anything. Any tips on getting over this? Well, this is a big part of what we were talking about earlier about feeding your muse, and a big part of what we were talking about earlier with listening to your heart. If you're suffering from writer's block or you're suffering from art block, it probably means that you're not feeling terribly inspired or motivated to finish that piece of art. If you are motivated, but you're stuck and you think, I want to make this good, but I don't know how, spend a little while just trying to jam the circle into the square hole, you know. I mean, in that video, they all went through just fine, but you know what I'm saying. You know, try to jam the key into the wrong lock for a while, see if it'll fit, but eventually you may reach a point where you feel like you can't do anything. As you've said, you enter a depressive episode, and then you've got no idea what to do next. What comes after this, I would say, is a process of going back to the drawing board. Think about the whole thing that you've made from the beginning and think about what can I change in order to take this in a direction where I can figure this out. Because I had pretty bad writer's block recently. But what it took to overcome was challenging my preconceptions. What it took was challenging, because with a story especially, you can feel so adamant about how everything plays out in your head. You know, you'll have the ending scene, you'll have the opening scene, you'll have a fight scene here, you'll have an argument here, a dinner scene there, and you'll be so convinced that these scenes must play out in that exact way that when you're connecting that piece of string, the rest of those scenes between those big moments that you want to work, suddenly you might reach one and think, wait a minute, this just isn't working. How do I do this? Sometimes going back to the drawing board, and I would say, remember, feed your muse, watch good films, consume good art, listen to good music, think really hard about what they've done with their plots, with their structures, their sketches, whatever it is, the mixes, whatever it is that applies to the art that you do. Think about how they did it and look at your own work of art from a really far distance. Don't just think about the scene you're writing. Don't just think about the hand you're drawing. Think about the arm. Think about the whole act. Think about the second, the first act. Everything that's come before it can lead to every other moment. And at that point, sometimes you might have done something you didn't quite like earlier on, and maybe you just kind of left it, and then now you're seeing the consequences of having written, drawn, or mixed yourself into a corner. Remember this, when it comes especially to writing and with music, no one publishes their first ever draft. Most people who are professionals in this industry will publish something that has been written and rewritten 3, 4, 5, however many times. So if you hit a block, try re-examining it, restructuring it, and then if you think, fuck it, there's no way, just try and get to the end, look at it as a completed product and think, right, time to start editing. What do I do for the second time? What do I do for the third time? And eventually, that writer's block will just be a thing of the past. Give yourself space, be healthy, and allow yourself to breathe, exercise, everything like that. Be healthy and happy in as many ways as you can, and your creativity will start to flow easier. But the most important thing is to admit to yourself that sometimes you can just be wrong. And admitting that and then changing it is a part of how you grow and improve and make your art better overall. This is a big thing because a lot of the time we want to believe as artists, and this comes into the whole I'm going to be the next Spielberg thing that a lot of that a lot of like, you know, students just entering film uni, at least that I experience, would say. The fact is, you don't know that yet. And if you are obsessed with the idea that I am amazing, I am God's gift to art, I am going to do it, and my dream is this and my dream is that, you can believe that 100%. And maybe one day you will be God's gift to art. Maybe one day you will achieve everything you've ever wanted. But I don't think you will if you're so uncomfortable about the idea that you can't, with your current skill set, achieve that dream right now. There are no shortcuts. You just have to keep growing. And the thing about Spielberg, the thing about Kubrick, the thing about Leonardo da Vinci, the thing about everyone who's ever made a beautiful work of art, they all started when they fucking sucked. The very first film that Quentin Tarantino ever made, My Friend's Birthday, first of all, half of the film was destroyed in a fire, and second of all, he refuses to show it to anyone because he thinks it fucking sucks. And he is now one of 2 filmmakers, maybe 3, well, 2 of the main ones, who can sell a film to hundreds of millions of dollars in success purely based on the recognition of their name alone. Tarantino especially really fucking did come from nothing and just putting his all into whatever he did. He had a day job at a VHS store. Remember what I said earlier about remembering to feed your passions even when you're not working on them. He loved film, and he worked in a place where he was surrounded by film and people who wanted to watch films. His curiosity and his creativity was being developed constantly, even before he had ever even set pen to paper. And of course, working at a VHS store, he was always renting films out, taking them home. Tonight I'm going to watch this one. Tonight I'm going to watch this one. Constantly learning more and more and more. There's a fascinating interview with Tarantino where I think it's Jimmy Kimmel, and he's got like these VHS tapes, and he reads the blurb on these obscure B-movie horror VHS tapes. He reads like, oh, a demon Rottweiler from hell, and he's like, oh, that one's this one. He immediately knows because he's taken so much time to learn about his craft. And with him, he was a complete and utter fucking nobody working in a video store, but he was working on a script just in his spare time. Every once in a while, he would knock out a little bit of that script. And when he finished it, he gave that script to one of his friends. He said, hey, why don't you give this a read? And they thought, that's pretty good. They showed it to someone else. They thought it was good. They showed it to their wife. Their wife thought it was good. Their wife showed it to their acting teacher, and they thought it was good. And then their acting teacher showed it to, at the time, legendary actor Harvey Keitel. That script was Reservoir Dogs, and now here he is today as Quentin Tarantino, one of the most famous and most brilliant filmmakers who has ever lived. Kind of losing track of the original question, but that story is one of the most important ones, I think, for just how a lot of luck involved. Oh yeah, a lot of luck, so much luck. But that was someone who put themselves around their passion and never gave up until they made it. And he was constantly challenging and improving upon his own work. He was constantly developing it. He had made something in the past that he fucking hated his first film, but he kept trying. He wrote the script for Reservoir Dogs, and because he put himself around so many movies, and because he believed in himself, and because he was so talented, he created just such a brilliant script that alone launched his career. You, listening, you can absolutely do that as well. Who are you to say that you can't do that? Who are you to say that by spending time to create something that is worth a lot and something that you care about, that you might not run into that same kind of luck? There's no way. You can't guarantee that. And so you should keep trying. Because if you believe that you can't make it, if you believe that it's all luck and you're not lucky and your RNG is going to suck and no one's going to wind up seeing it and nobody will like it, if you wind up not publishing anything, you wind up not putting yourself out there and not trying, then you really never will. But if you try your very best, you just might. And for me, at least, I think that is worth the effort, the extra effort at the end of the day to really try and do something you care about. And you never know when that shitty day job that you're working might be a thing of the past, like it was for me. For me, it started with a fucking Google Doc from, at the time, a company that I had never heard of. I didn't know what NIJISANJI was, but I gave it a go because I was interested. And now here I am, closer than ever to a career that I've always wanted. This is 100% possible for you too. The paths we go on in life are so unlikely. And really, when you think about luck, and when you think about the kinds of things that we do in order to find luck, and the things that we've done to get where we are, think about the low chance there is of you being in this position that you're at in your life right now. Someone that you met who introduced you to something that you wound up loving. Someone who, a best friend of yours who you made because you wound up just coincidentally sat together at lunch in school. All of this is very quote unquote luck based, but it happened, and more lucky things can happen if you put yourself in a position where that luck can find you. Simple as that. Well, it's not simple, but in theory, it is kind of simple if you think about it. Okay, thank you for all the supers, everybody. I'm going to do one more question, and then I'm going to get some food. Rinto, I feel like all I'm good for is making plans. I always make so many plans, but my action is lacking. I know that my ideas have potential, but for some reason, all I do is think. I want to move. What a great final question. Holy shit. That's a really, really nice question. Very poetically put as well. All I can do is plan and think, but I want to move. I was in very much the same position, I think, for many years. And very much in the same position of having a million different ideas and a million different things that I really wanted to do, but not having the motivation or the know-how to really do any of it. And so for a long time, I was just kind of coasting, like, what'll I do to make money here? What'll I do to find food here? What am I going to do to have fun this evening? Who am I going to hang out with to, introduce myself to this new place? Blah, 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 blah. For a while, I was just kind of coasting. I'll tell you something about doing rather than thinking. All it takes is one tiny success, just one, to make you realize how good it feels. It feels amazing to think of an amazing idea and then marinate on it. I've been doing that a lot recently, and I have a lot of projects in the works that I've been kind of working towards because of, the place that I've been given and the opportunities that I have to express myself now. Thinking about those ideas is great, and it can be a very comfortable place to be, right? It can be very comfortable to just sit and think. And scary. Now, I'm going to put a friend of mine on blast again because I love him very much. But not someone but someone I know in real life who really wants to be a writer, and he works really hard on this series of books that he's making, and he's written the plot outline for 6 long books, and these are long outlines as well. A lot of work over the course of many years he's been working on this. But apart from a few pages, random scenes that he's wanted to write as a bit of a thought exercise, he hasn't actually started on the proper first draft of the first one yet. And I empathize with him a lot for this, and I don't think that it makes him, less of a creative person, because, to be honest, I've spoken to him about this before, and I've been kind of straight up like, what are you going to do about this? I feel that, and he feels too, when there's a lot of personality and a lot of yourself going into something creative, putting it down on a piece of paper and making it real is scary, because you don't know whether or not all of this time and effort that you've put into something is going to turn out to just be bad? What if I spent the last 6 years of my life putting all of my emotional energy and my passion into something that I thought would be just the greatest thing the world had ever seen, and I had so much passion, but now that I'm finally ready to sit down and really make that possible, I'm so afraid of the idea that it might be less than what I imagined that I just keep sitting back. Oh, good example from me so that I can rag on myself a little bit. You may notice that I sound a little bit different today, and I sounded very different last night when I joined Pomu's birthday. That was because I had been practicing a song. I told you guys yesterday that I have a new cover in the works. I don't know when it's going to come out. You don't know when it's going to come out. I'm not going to tell you much, but yeah, I've already told you. I told you guys during Smash. Yeah. I've got a new song coming out eventually. I don't know when. I'm just sort of, chundling away, working at it. But it's something that I've wanted to make for a really, really long time. For the past year, actually, I've had the concept for a music video for it in my head, every single second of it mapped out. Every single second of that mapped out in a way that I thought was completely perfect. But for that whole year, when I was like, I'm going to cover this song, and it's going to have this music video, and it's going to be great, singing it is really hard. It's not a type of singing that I'm used to. And when I was practicing yesterday, I really strained my voice, and I wound up sounding like this. The fact is, I was scared. I was scared that I would have put so much time, money, and emotional energy into a project that one day I would sit down and try to actually sing, and it would just sound bad. I was scared. But then, yesterday, things really started to go ahead. People are working on all sorts of different parts of it. The music video started, the instrumental started, and I think I need to do this. And because I've been able to do this before, sit down and make myself do something I'm scared to do, I sat there and I practiced, and I practiced, and I practiced. And even though I wound up hurting my voice a little bit in the end, I thought it sounded really fucking good. So that's the thing that I will say about it, is that with any piece of work that you've done, thinking about it creates a fantasy of the perfect creative project, something that will change lives, will shatter expectations, will just turn you into a god in the eyes of everyone else. We all, if you have a decent sense of self-esteem and love for the things that you create, you have really high expectations for yourself, and that's normal, and that's fine. But you can't let it get to but if it gets to the point, it will get to the point where you're like, right, what if I don't have the ability to actually make something that good? You will. If in your mind, the thing that you've made and the idea for the thing that you've got is so brilliant, you mustn't be scared to write it down, because I'm going to tell you something and it's going to blow your fucking mind. The thing in your head that takes up such a perfect, isolated view of like the Mona Lisa behind a bulletproof glass of nothing in life in my head will ever touch how perfect this thing I'm thinking about is. If you write it down, sketch it out, make a beat or something like that, you will maybe find flaws with it. Maybe you'll take that as a reason to be scared, and you'll think, shit, right? Oh no, it's not what I thought it would be. But then this thing that in your head was so brilliant and so perfect, you will suddenly know how to make it even better. Can you imagine that? Really think about how fantastic that is. That you have right now a thought in your head for something that you think is the best thing that you could ever possibly make. All it will take is writing it down and finding a couple flaws in it that doesn't mean that you've made a bad work of art, and it doesn't mean that the thing you've made is inherently going to fail. It means that something you thought was perfect now has a chance to be even better. Sounds like a good deal to me. So if you can do anything for me, and that's my answer to the question, but I'll round off now as well. This is the kind of closing thoughts in answer to that question and in answer to all of you. If you have an idea for something, if you've wanted to find your place and within a creative industry or sector, but you've been scared to, your fear comes from the idea that what if I'm not good enough? You will be. You may not be good enough to be dropped in front of a crew of tens of thousands and direct the next installment of Star Wars right now. But if you try hard enough, and if you work hard enough, and if you are constantly putting your ideas out there, iterating on them and working on them in a way that is comfortable and that follows your vision as a creative person, one day you might be. Right now, sure, you might have low self-esteem and you might worry that you might not actually get there. But I can promise you, the fear you have of putting that pen to paper and really staring your own soul in the face, seeing what it is that has made you more emotional than anything else in the world, finally look back at you. If you, as a person, can look at that and really contend with it, instead of falling into a depression where you think, I'm not good enough and this isn't what I imagined it would be, I wish it was better, process that sadness, internalize it, contain it, knot it up in your stomach, and then, when you're ready, start changing it, add to it, write it down. If a word you like doesn't work, do a different word. If you've sketched someone's hand and it doesn't look very good, erase it and sketch it again. We are all imperfect beings. The most talented people on the planet make works of art that are not perfect. And you, I'm sorry to say, are certainly not perfect either. You have flaws, and the work that you create will inevitably be flawed. Fundamentally, in some ways, there is just no avoiding it. Learning to accept this, that even in a work of art that some have small flaws, some have glaring flaws, even in art that has glaring flaws, plot holes, incorrect anatomy, there is beauty. And the more of that beauty that you feel passionate about and that you wish to put out into the world, the more beauty that you'll be able to put into every single thing that you create. And one day, even if people don't right now, they will see that in you. Someone who before might have told you that you won't make it will acknowledge that, yeah, I think you will. So make me proud. If there's been anything inside your mind that you've always wanted to put to paper but you've been too scared to because you were worried of ruining that perfect image of it in your head, silence that part of your soul that cries out to be perfect all the time. Because I'm sorry, you're not already. Nothing about you is perfect. Everything about you is beautiful in a very unique way. Your mind, your body, your face, your voice, your personality, it's all beautiful. And so will your work be, if you just put it out there. Because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and how can we find beauty if you don't put it out there for someone to see it? Thanks for coming, everyone. The doors are at the back. I'll see you tomorrow.